Thank you. I'd like to call this session of the Board of Revision to order and begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Ojibwe, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 41st Nation Treaty 3 territory. With me today are Mike Colachuglio and Ron Merritt. My name is Harvey Diamond, and I'll be chairing this meeting. The City Assessment Department is being represented by Roddy Pantanella, and our administrator is Zachary Moen. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment rules in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for revision are requests that have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing must be sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to those matters must first be sworn in. Be advised that comparison of assessments of properties are not considered as evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decision based on the evidence provided at this hearing and will issue written orders that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or to classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to an application for exemption from taxation. And should you wish to appeal, information on do so will be included with our order. With respect to the hearing process, we'll confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by any questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by any questions. Each side will give an opportunity to summarize if they wish to do so. Once all of the evidence upon application is brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private to make its decisions. You receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will form part of a public record. And today we'll be hearing items 1 through 8 on the docket. And Mr. Mohan, you can please now affirm the assessor's testimony and the applicant's testimony.
Of course, Mr. Chair. Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Rodrigo Pantanilla.
Do you affirm that the evidence about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. I guess we'll start with Mr. Sharples. Please state your full name.
Grayson Sharples.
Do you affirm that the evidence about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And Mr. Horsborough, please state your full name.
Carson Horsborough.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the first item on our agenda today is the property at 333 Gary Street. And I understand that there are a number of preliminary matters to discuss. One is the city seeking a non-co-op order on that. And I note that the applicant has made application on this and all the files before us today for not only decreasing the assessment, but also claiming classification liability are an issue. Is that correct, Mr. Sharples?
Partially. So we checked those boxes more of a precaution. We won't be challenging any of the tax class or liability issues. So we do
on any of the items on the docket today?
Correct.
Okay, so you'll have to complete an application or a document that will be withdrawing those provisions from the application.
Correct.
I'm sure I'll email it to you and you'll have to send it back.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm correct then. I just want to make sure that we're not dealing then on any of these items with the items of liability or classifications.
Can I interject?
Yes.
That's not entirely true. On the first docket, we do have a class and liability. We can call it a request, I guess, and we can get into that. I was actually going to speak to that once we began this first file, but I believe that's the only file in the docket where there's some discussion about liability, but I have been in contact with the agent regarding it. But we can get into it once we start the files, but that's the only one that I can think of anyway.
Okay, and on the first one, is you are asking for a non-co-op.
That's correct.
And so if we do grant the non-co-op, you have to deal with that before because the applicant will be going first if that's the case, if we make that finding.
If that's what you guys wish to proceed forward, but again, once we start to discuss the file, we can sort of discuss where we're going to take it, but I'll wait until we're getting into the file to begin that conversation.
Well, Mr. Pantanella, you can begin then on 333 Gary Street. And,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so I'll start my presentation, and I'll just get through the first preliminary details here. The file number is 24-978. The roll number is 1305 217 2000. The address is 333 Gary Street. The 2025 assessment as of a reference date of April 1st, 2023 went out at $968,000. And as you had alluded to, we are seeking a non-cooperation as we haven't received a mailer for the subject property.
Okay.
Did you want me to get into the rest of it? Because there are some more details that might supersede this non-cooperation. That's why I'm not really sure how you guys want me to proceed with it, but I do have some more information to share that might make this irrelevant anyways, but it's up to you guys how you want to proceed.
Okay, well, you're giving the evidence, and I never wanted to do with how evidence is given to us.
Okay, so maybe I'll
comfortable-
just,
So
sure.
how do you feel comfortable presenting? Please,
Okay,
please.
maybe I'll just brief you then. So originally I had been seeking non-cooperation like any other file just because we haven't received any income and expense mailer for the 2022 year that we requested. But as it happens, just this Monday, so several days ago, I was informed by the agent that in fact we do have what appears to be a church that's operating on the main floor. So from our records, I checked, we have no occupancy permit requests. We have no change of use requests. We have no permit requests in our database that would suggest that any sort of activity was occurring on the main floor. We just have a vacancy from the previous tenant who was a coffee shop. So the news kind of was a startle to me because there wasn't anything in the brief as well regarding a church on the main floor. So I actually took a vehicle and I did a drive-by and inspected the subject property just to confirm that that indeed was the case. What I could find when I did go, it appears that there is signage up that does appear to show that there's indeed a church that's operating on the main floor. So from my research into this file, I believe, in my opinion, the best course of action would be to simply confirm the assessment that we have on file with the understanding that the agent is going to be providing an application for a request for class and liability exemption for the first floor. The complication with this one is because we're under non-cooperation, I don't really have any evidence that I can hang as to what size of space the church is currently leasing. Our records indicate that we have two premises on the first floor. We have two premises at 1,250 square feet each. And since the areas weren't disputed in the agent's brief, we have to go with that as the area that we're sort of working with. So there's some questions in regards to many things with this property. And as I previously mentioned, my recommendation on this file would be to simply confirm what we have, because once the request comes in, if and when the exemption is granted, which it appears to be that it is a church, I did a little bit of research into the name of the church that's there, and from what I could find online, it does seem to be that they are a place of worship. But again, that would need to be confirmed as well. We do have some legislation in regards to the exact nature of the use of the church there, you know, like, is it a place of worship? Is it not? There's many questions. So I'm open to offering a class and liability exemption if and when the application comes in showing that indeed that is the case. But besides that, I can't necessarily speak to more on that just because, again, we have no records in our city whatsoever of an occupancy request or anything in regards to the church on the main floor.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sharples, I have to say that we don't have no evidence on your file from you. I went through what you filed that seeks an exemption for a church. So I don't think that we have, not having any evidence, we probably confirm it anyway. But Mr. Paginella has indicated that he'd be open for an application after we make our finding today. And if there is in fact a church there, you'd have to proceed to qualify it. And if you're entitled to an exemption, I think Mr. Paginella is saying that the assessing department will provide it. Are you good with that?
Yeah, that's correct. So we became aware that the church space was occupying this building after we submitted our evidence here. So we will get that form submitted for the class and liability. We do still have an issue with the value amount, though.
Value amount is fine, and that's before us. And as you know, the assessment board is also seeking a non-co-op. And do you have any issues with regard to that?
No, it does appear that the income and expense questionnaire was not submitted. So
Okay, well, we're gonna have the assessor go through his material to make sure it's done properly, and then we'll have to have a hearing in camera to decide whether we're going to grant the request or not. But thank you, Mr. Sharples. Okay, Mr. Pinella, you can go forward with your evidence insofar as non-co-op is concerned.
Okay, thank you. So I guess we'll skip ahead to the non-cooperation component, and then so we'll come back to it to page 2 once we deal with this preliminary matter. So I would ask the panel and the agent, if he wishes, to proceed to page, I believe it's 13 of my brief, and we can start from there. So on page 13, we do have a document that was submitted to the City of Winnipeg from the Canada Post Office. We have a tracking number there at the top, LP6, etc., CA. And then we do have some information in regards to the item being out for delivery on June 12th, and then the signature being received that it was delivered to the subject property. On page 14, I do have another document that was submitted to the City of Winnipeg by Canada Post showing the scanned signature of the parcel being delivered to the subject property. And then on page 15, we see that this would be the cover letter that was sent out to request the income and expense mailer. And as it was the official cover letter that then is requesting the tracking to proceed, there is a tracking number at the top. So once again, it's LP66176740CA. And we can match that with the, if we scroll back up a little bit, we can match that with the Canada Post delivery signature. And we can match that as well on page 13 with the other document submitted to us by Canada Post showing that indeed the parcel was delivered to the subject property and that they received it.
Thank you.
And then on page 16, it's the French cover letter portion of it. And then heading forward there on page 17 and taking us to the end of the brief is the reprint of the official income and expense mailer that would have been requested to the subject property.
Yeah, thank you.
That's my presentation on that. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Sharples, I don't want to preclude that you can ask any questions of the session on regarding non-cooperation if you should do so. So if you have any questions, you can put them forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one, actually. You mentioned that this was sent to the subject property. That would be 333 Gary Street. Just looking at page 15 here, I just want to clarify this. Like, this was not delivered to the subject property, correct? It was delivered to Proden Investments at 296 Marion.
Well, when I say subject property, it's the address that we have on file associated with the subject property. So in a literal sense, it might not have been delivered to 333 Gary Street, but it was delivered to the owner of the subject property. You can see the name on page 15, the same page that you're referring to. You see the name at the top, which shows the owner, and then it just shows the address. So it looks like the owner received it and they signed and dated it. So, or they signed it at least showing that they received it.
Okay. No, yeah, that should be correct. I just wanted to clarify that this was not sent to 333 Gary.
Yep, that's correct.
But any questions, Mr. Palachukio?
Just to be clear, Prodan Investments, that is where the tax bill was sent in the first place, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Yes,
Yes, that's correct.
thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, any questions?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any either. So we're going to have to go into camera and make a decision whether we're going to grant the non-co-op or not. Thank you. Parties, we've come to the conclusion that the non-co-op should be granted, and we're doing so. So on that basis, the applicant will provide their evidence first. The onus shifts to the applicant, from the assessment department. And the penalty is that any reduction that we may give will not advantage the applicant until the 2026 taxation year. So you can go forward, Mr. Sharples, with your evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the property address is 333 Gary Street. Roll number is 130-521-72000. And the file number is 24978. Move ahead to page 3 of our submission. Just another brief description of this property. So it's a 10,121 square foot retail store, and it has an assessed year built of 1911. So the property's been assessed at a value of 968,000, and we're requesting that this be reduced to $655,000. And this will be based off the purchase price of the property. Pages 4 and 5, we have the current assessment and valuation breakdown. And then once again, on page 6, we just have our requested assessment amount. And this is based off the June 2021 purchase price of $655,000. Page 7, we have the assessment map and a satellite map. And some photos from Street View on page 8. On page 9, we have our valuation. So the assessed value amounts to $95.64 a square foot. We've identified some comparable sales. They range in value from just under $45 a square foot to about $100 a square foot. From this, we get an average sale price of $79.48 a square foot. And so based on all this, we believe that this value should be closer to about $80 a square foot. You'll notice the third sale in our list here is the subject property, sold in June 2021 for $655,000. That's $64.72 a square foot. So this is obviously our most comparable sale. It's our position that there is no better indicator of market value than the subject property itself being sold. And so again, this sold in June of 2021. So this falls within the valuation period for 2025. And it is based on this that we're requesting that purchase price of $655,000. I apologize, my computer is slow to respond right now. But at page 10 through roughly 12 or 13, we'll have photos of the comparable sales we've used. And obviously in looking at the pictures, there is no closer comparable than the subject property itself. And those comparables do go through until page 13. And so just to summarize briefly on page 14, once again, we have our requested value. This is based on the June 2021 purchase price. This date does fall within the valuation period, and it was purchased for $655,000. And with that, we respectfully ask the board to reduce the assessment amount to $655,000. Page 15 is, we just have the notice of hearing in there as well. And with that, I conclude the presentation. Welcome any questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Patinello, any questions of Mr. Sharples?
I do. So I looked at his brief and I saw that the agent is requesting that we go down to the sales price. And so we have here on his page 9, I believe, of 16, where he has all of his comparable sales.
Mr. Pudnell, you're asking questions right now, not.
I am. Yep. I'm setting up the framing to ask the question. So on page, if we look on page 9 of 16, we can see his comparable sales. And I wanted to ask the agent where his sale falls in relation to all of these subject properties. So are we at the lower end or are we at the higher end of the sales?
It would be on the lower end.
Okay. And would it show that the lower end of the sales indicates that in a mass appraisal approach, would the sales price be considered a little bit lower than what the market average would be given the comparable sales that you have in front of you that you put forward as evidence?
Yeah, that could be the case. I mean, I would note as well that this property is bigger than the other comparables we do have.
Considerably.
Um,
So that actually brings me to my next question that you brought me directly to. Given the fact that the subject property is 10,121 square feet, is it appropriate to have other subject properties that don't even break north of 3,800 square feet?
Yeah, so this was an older property built in 1911, so we did try to pull some sales that were older. But yeah, again, we believe that the subject property purchase itself is the most comparable.
Okay, and then if you look at the 824 Main Street, your first sales, I noticed that it's actually August 2023 as a sale, so I would ask the board to not take that one sale into consideration. Okay, so we've gone over the sales, we've gone over where our subject property is in relation to the sales that he provided. I believe as we have no other information, what can you tell us about the sale? Is there anything you can tell us about the sale itself? Do you have any information on the sale that would lend some insight into whether this was an arm's length sale, whether it was below markets? I see that we have the sale in June 2021, so realty was a little crazy during the COVID period there.
If you're asking questions, Mr. Pudnell, I respect the fact that you can ask questions.
Yep.
But please try to give evidence. You can do that in your summation.
Okay, yep.
Okay.
Okay, I will, here, let me see if I can reframe this question. Given the history that we have currently gone through economically, given the fact that your own sales price is actually on the low end of all the sales that you provided, what can you tell us about the sale itself between the purchaser and the vendor?
We don't have information
Okay.
regarding any of the purchase.
So in other words, we don't know any of the details regarding why that sales price was what it is.
No, we don't.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Colachuglio, do you have any questions?
Just for clarification, the building goes from one street all the way across to the other street, so there's two fronts to the building, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And one side appears to have retail space on the main floor, the other side appears not to have a current tenant at the moment.
We do have some information on the tenancy. We have not included it in our brief again, just because we received this information after the submission.
Is it
I do believe there are two tenants on the main floor, one of them being the church.
Okay, that's a fairly recent tenancy.
Yes.
All right, and I note that you have shown some comparables. I see you have a problem in that none of them are as large as the subject building is. They're all quite a bit smaller by 2/3 smaller than the subject property. Were you unable to find any better comparisons for this, sir?
I don't recall exactly how we determine these comparables, but yeah, I would assume that based on the information we had available, we determined that these were the closest comparable sales.
And I also note that you did not attempt an income valuation for this.
We did not know. It was our position that the purchase price was the best indicator of value. And so we did not do an income valuation.
Do you not think that might have been helpful to the board, considering that's how the department does the valuations for these types of properties, sir?
It could have been, but again, it was just our position that this was the best indicator of what the value should be.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, any questions?
Yes, I have a couple of them. You have presented here almost like a direct comparison sales approach, and you've concluded, a rate per square foot. Did you not, when you look at your comparables, did you not expand in regards to developing a cap rate for these sales at all, or?
No, we did not look into any income parameters.
Okay. And you can't really tell us anything about the sale. Like, did you talk to your client and did they say, what did they say at the time? Or
They have not provided any information on the sale to us.
so you don't know whether it was listed or a private sale or anything like that?
We do not. So we got the sales from, these are all taken from the Johnson report. And so we don't have any purchase agreement or anything like that. So everything, all the information about this sale would have been collected by Wayne Johnson and provided in his report.
Okay, I thank you very kindly. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So, Mr. Sharples, I guess what Mr. Chulachubia was asking about an income approach, which is the way these properties are usually evaluated, and only the city will go to direct comparison approach when there are properties that it's impossible to make a determination. Like, for example, car dealerships are always owned by the car dealership, so there's no rentals available to do that. So then if the car dealership is sold, they'll use that to try to evaluate. But properties that have leases in them are always evaluated on a market evaluation on the basis, not a market evaluation, I'm sorry, on a income evaluation. And if it's impossible to even do a comparison of market approach, then they'll sometimes use a cost of building with the depreciated value. But so I just wondering why you presented your evidence the way you did.
Yeah, again, I think just we felt that the purchase price was a great indicator of value. We didn't receive the breakdown per space type and leasing information in the building until after the submission. Knowing that information, it would have been helpful to do an income valuation. I acknowledge that, but at the time we prepared this submission. The only information we had to go off was the purchase price. So again, it had been vacant for a while, and so we didn't have any leasing from the building. We didn't know the different space types. So at the time we prepared this was the best information we had available.
Okay, and your comparisons, the properties that you did use are very different properties, as been pointed out to you, and they're in very, very different portions of the city. So could you not find other properties in the downtown area and buildings like the one that is being is before us right now?
Yeah, again, I don't recall how I went about selecting these comparables. Just in searching through them, I presume that these were the best comparables that we had available to us.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Pantanelli, you can go forward with your submission.
Okay, thank you. Can you guys hear me okay still?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So we already went over the cover page, I believe, for the subject property, and then we did go through the cooperation request. On page 2, I have included a pad eye view image of the subject property so we can see its orientation in the neighborhood. On page 3, I've included some pictometry overhead view of the subject property. On page 4, I have included a south-facing view and an east-facing view of the subject property. And then on page 5, I have included a Google Street View images taken of the subject property, so we can orient ourselves there. So we haven't received any requests for information for quite a while from the subject property. I can say now that I'm at this section of my presentation that I did happen to take a look, and we do have a mailer that was submitted in 2020 that showed some information, and this is important in regards to the tenancy of the building, which we'll get to once we continue forward with the presentation. But in terms of the reference period and the year before that, we don't have any information from the subject property. We already discussed the sales history of the subject property. So we have one in June 23rd, 2021 for $655 with a sworn value of $675. A little bit of a discrepancy there. August 18th, 2015, we have a consideration and sworn value of $545. And May 6, 2011, we have a consideration and sworn value of $475. And while this is post-reference, I do believe that the subject property is actually listed for sale at the moment. Heading forward now to page 8 of my brief, I have included some lease information. Admittedly, it's not a lot of information, but nonetheless, I do have some to share of the current leases that are being received within the subject property's vicinity. These are all from the Market Region 4. They're all listed as C2 spaces, and they're all from leases that are 2006 and above. So one's a little older. Taking us forward now to the subject's income stream. So we do have a lot of premises that are associated with the subject property. Some of my review of the subject property to orient myself did indicate to me that we have 2 premises on the main floor. And then from there, we have a series of premises associated with the second, third, and if you just give me a second to look here, we have premises associated on the second, third, and fourth floor spaces. So if we go through each one and then we go to the meta view, we have a total of 10,121 square feet, and we have a potential rent of $109,764. And if we do a quick blended rate, 109,764 divided by 10,121, we do have an overall blended rate of $10.85 on the subject property. So if we go back up to our comparable information, it looks to be right within the range, even at the lower end, actually, of the range of lease information we have there. And this is another point that I had discovered when I was doing my review of the subject property. This is another question, but again, because we don't have tenancy, it's information through the income and expense request. It's very difficult to confirm what is happening at the building. I understand the agent said that the building is vacant, but my understanding is that the second and third floors are being occupied by musicians. I'm not really sure of the exact tenancy that's going on in the second and third floors. I was sort of piecing it together from some of the information that we have from previous colleagues of mine who've gone to the subject property to try to confirm what the occupation is there, and it's still a little unclear. But from what I can understand, and from what the 2020 mailer does show, it shows that the second and third floor spaces, maybe even the fourth floor, but again, it's from 2020, so it's unclear, that they are being currently occupied. And in fact, the occupation does show a rent, which again, it's unclear whether it's gross or net, so it's hard to speak to it exactly. But it goes to show that the rental rates that we have seem to be exactly what's being, or thereabouts as to what's being received in the leases. And so what I'm trying to get to is that I noticed on the income stream when it went out under this current assessment cycle that we have a 15% vacancy that's currently being applied to the subject property. I'm not even sure if that 15% is currently merited because we don't have any income and expense mailer information. I can't confirm nor deny that this actually should be a modeled rate and not 15%. But because it went out for this cycle under this value, I'm not seeking to dispute that 15%. As a city, we can accept that 15% for this cycle. But I just wanted to bring that up that due to the nature of the information that we have, it's unclear whether it's even merited to have that 15% on the income stream. But with that being said, we do have a 15% vacancy that's carried on. We do have a 3% expense and a $7 shortfall per square foot. So that brings us to our net operating income of $79,873. And then from there, the city of Winnipeg has applied a cap rate of 8.25%, which brings us to the assessed value for this cycle of $968,000. On page 10 is a summary of the information that I have just provided. On page 11, we do have our cap rate information to how the city of Winnipeg applies cap rates. And I would note that for retail spaces, we don't have the exact property type that's currently under, but we do have an idea of where the retail spaces are. And if we go as low as strip mall, we can look at the strip mall row and we can see that we have a column from the 20th and 80th percentile of 5.6 to 6.75. So the majority of our retail cap rates did seem to fall into that range. And then if we look at our outside sources, we have Colliers at a 6 to 7% cap rate range for the 20th and 80th. For CBRE, a 6 and 7% range. And for Cushman and Wakefield, we have a 6.5 and a 7.5% range for cap rates. So that gives me no indication that a cap rate of 8.25% is not merited for the subject property. And then from there, I have some Municipal Assessment Act excerpts that are pertinent to the process that we're currently underway. And then on page 13, and taking us to the end of my brief, is my presentation on the income and expense non-cooperation documents that we have. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sharples, any questions of the assessor?
I've got a few. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking at the subject sale history on page 7. Does the assessment department consider purchase prices in determining assessed values or no?
It's a consideration. There are many other factors that go into our mass appraisal approach, but sales prices can be under certain considerations. It can have an influence on the assessment value, yes.
Okay, and then just looking at, I mean, it sold in 2011, 2015, 2021, and you mentioned it may be listed again, but it hasn't increased a ton in all these purchase prices. So do you believe that if from 2015 to 2021 it increased by about 100,000, that it would be warranted to add an additional 2 years, that 655,000 would increase to the assessed value of 968,000?
Well, if you look at our information, we have a sworn value and a consideration value that are different. So that right away indicates to me that I'm not really sure I'd rest my hat on this sales price as a good indicator of market value. Your own brief shows that it is on the lower end of the sales that we have on files. So I wouldn't necessarily say that that would be the correct value. My income approach shows that I use cap rates that are within range. All of our rental rates that we have applied are within range. We have a blended rate of just over $10 a square foot. And I do think that the value that the city has provided is the correct value for the subject property.
Okay. Do you know if the sales in 2011 and 2015 were also on the lower range of value?
I didn't look at that far back, as our reference period is 2023. I looked at what was closest.
Okay. Okay. So that's all the questions for me. I believe Carson has one or two.
Hi, Mr. Constantino. I have 2 questions for you. Looking at page 9 of your brief, got 2 questions on it. Earlier in your presentation, you indicated that the Assessment and Taxation Department wasn't really sure as to what's going on in terms of leases, tenants, and the property. Is that correct?
Correct.
What are you basing your leasable areas, the breakdown on page 9? What are you basing that on? When was that information determined by the city, and how was it determined?
That's historical information that we would have had from field forms, probably filled out in 1911 when the building was built.
Okay, so you don't know that this is the way that the leasing areas are split up.
Well, they haven't shared information. How would we know?
Okay, that's not what I asked. I asked, how does the city know that this is the area? And do you not know, or do you know that this is how the
Those are
leasing-
they're the records that we have on file. So unless it was disputed that it was different, which your own brief shows that it wasn't, it seems to be the area.
Okay, so you don't know for sure that this is the way the areas are split up, correct?
Well, Carson, if you're asking me if I've taken a ruler and measured it out down to exactly to what it is, and no, I haven't done that in the time that we appealed it. These are all historical records that we have.
I'm not asking you if you've measured it yourself. So I just want to confirm, we don't know that this is the way the different rental units are spaced out as of April 1st, 2023.
That's correct.
Okay. I want to move on to page 10, or sorry, no, not page 10, page 8. So your rent comparables, you've got 5 of them ranging in space from 268 square feet to 908 square feet.
That's correct.
Okay, and then on page 9, we have leasable areas up to about almost 2,700 square feet. Did you consider any larger comparable leases, higher square footage?
Well, that's the lease information that we had most up to date in the market region. That 2,600 square feet that you're referring to is actually a substandard basement, so it's not one of the main floor or upper premises. The main floor is at 1,200 square feet or 1,250. All the other premises are 750 to 200. So the information that I provided isn't exactly out of the ballpark of what the areas that are being on the income stream. So yeah, that's basically the information I could find within the market region.
So did you consider any other larger leased areas in determining the rental rates?
They're modeled, Carson.
Yes, but in terms of your comparables, did you look at any others?
I
They're
did,
larger?
but the ones that I put in were the market region comparable rentals that I thought was appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Pontignac.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, any questions?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kolchukwu, do you have any questions?
I just want to clarify something with the assessor, if I could.
Yep.
The age on your brief shows 1908.
Yep.
Isn't that correct? There's been no modification to that through the years, Don?
Not from what I can see, no. Nobody would have changed that over the years, and I don't think looking at our permit information that anything would have been flagged to indicate any sort of an effective age adjustment.
Yeah, and I'm just pointing out the fact that it appears that the appellant in this case feel that the age is 1911. I'm not sure where that's coming from. Am I mistaken?
So if I look at what we have on file for our records, our city records indicate that the it's looking like the overall year built is set to 1911 as well. So it's curious why it shows as 1908 there on that file, but it looks like from what I'm looking at here, it's showing 1911.
Okay, I was just curious as to what the difference was at that point.
Yep.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay. And I don't have a question, but just clarification. So your
Sure.
your rents on page 9
Yep.
Are all model driven, correct?
They're all model driven, correct.
And you're not aware what tenancies are there at this point right now?
At this point, I'm not. So the furthest I could go back to try to do some confirmation was 2020, and the 2020 mailer was filled out with their tenant verification section, and the areas and especially the rental rates were pretty much exactly what the model maybe not exactly, but it's right in the ballpark of what the model was predicting for this cycle. So I saw no need to make any adjustments on that end with the information that we have,
And
the
then-
most current information.
Okay, and the information you had, what vacancy did it show at that time?
The 2020 mailer?
Yeah,
I believe it shows no vacancy on it. I don't have anything on my list here on my notes about it. We have a income listed as 84,505. No other information really seems listed, actually, to be honest.
okay. So why did the model pick up a 15% vacancy?
So that 15% vacancy would have been carried forward at some moment in the past. There would have been an assessor, someone in our department would have put that parameter, increase that parameter for a site-specific reason. When I was originally doing my research into the subject property to try to understand the current tenancy and the use and the layout within the subject property, it had occurred to me that that might have had something to do with the third and fourth floors not having tenants in it or something. But when I looked at that 2020 mailer, it actually showed indeed that there were tenants on the second and third floors. So it's a little unclear as to why the 15% vacancy had carried forward. Typically, those are put on for a cycle and then they come off at the beginning of a general reassessment. So I'm not really sure why that would have been carried forward, but I hadn't put that on myself. It's something that I noticed when it was under appeal is when I noticed that 15% was on there.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that answers my questions.
Thanks.
Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman,
So,
Mr. Chairman, if I can interject for just a moment. It appears that class and liability has still not been withdrawn by MNP. And I'm just kind
it
of.
has, well, it hasn't been withdrawn. They indicate that we can confirm, and they're going to make an application insofar as the church is concerned after today's date.
That's correct.
True, but in the meanwhile, the hearing that we're sitting at, class and liability really is irrelevant because we have heard no evidence from either side regarding it because there was none presented.
And Mr. Colatrulio, I believe that the applicant said that they were withdrawing those provisions from all the applications before us
And
today.
what I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, is that it has not happened yet.
Okay.
Well, no, I think they indicate they're going to file the necessary documentation to withdraw that, and they'll do that today. They indicated.
We'll try and address it from this end, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I was just trying to clarify.
No, and I appreciate that because if we miss something, I wouldn't want to ask the questions later, but I think it is covered, Mr. Colatrulio.
I'm just looking at a note that I received from the secretary here in the hearing room.
Oh, okay.
That had not been done yet. The others have been received, but not that one.
Okay. Thank you for that. I didn't realize that. I thought that it was all in.
That's why I'm bringing it up, Mr. Chairman. My apologies.
Well, thank you for doing so. So, Mr. Sharples, are you going to be withdrawing your application so far as liability and classification are concerned?
So if we withdraw that, then do we no longer have the ability to submit the exemption form?
No, we
No.
can still do it. We can still do it.
Okay. So if that's the case, then
I
we
can tell you there's no evidence before us today, so we wouldn't be granting it anyway. But I give you the opportunity of speaking to it if you wanted to. But there's no evidence before us that gives us any basis for making those findings.
Right. Okay. So in that case, yeah, we can get that form added and submitted as well.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Colatrulio, for bringing that to my attention. I wasn't aware of that.
Not a problem, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, we'll then go on to item number 2 then, which is the property at 619 Broadway. And Mr. Poncinelli, you can proceed when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Just give me a second to open up my documents here. Just about ready, sorry. Okay. Okay, so up next we have file 24-881. The roll number is 1209-099-2000. The address is 619 Broadway. The 2025 assessed value with a reference date of April 1st, 2023 went out at $806,000. So we have this building currently pucked as a CMRST, a commercial retail store. We have one building associated. It's a one-premise building, one story. We have an actual year built, an effective year built of 1939. And then we have a total leasable area of 5,150 square feet. On page 2, I have included the pad eye view of the subject property to see its orientation in the neighborhood. On page 3, I have an overhead view of the subject property. On page 4, I have a south-facing view and an east-facing view of the subject property. And then on page 5 and page 6, I have included some Google Street View images of the subject property. We have received requests for income and expense information for the subject property, and we have no sales history to review for the subject property, and as well, we have no leases to review with the subject property. For the rent comparables that I have included rent comparables that have a leasable start time of 2012 and above. These are all retail rent comparables. They're all C2s, and they're all within market region 5. And so we do show within the comparables that we have a range from 1,076 square feet at the lower end up to 8,416 square feet at the higher end, as well as a range in rental rates from $13 at the lower end to $24.62 at the higher end. On page 9, we have the income stream for the subject property. So the subject property has a tenant class of C2. We have 5,150 square feet on file at a rate of $13.88 per square foot. So that brings us to a total potential rent of $71,482. And then from there, we have a 5% vacancy, a 3% expense, and a $7 shortfall per square foot, which brings us to a net operating income of $64,068. And then from there, we have a modeled cap rate of 7.95%, which brings us to our overall value of $806,000. On page 10, we do have a summary of the income stream that we just spoke about. On page 11, we do have our cap rate information. So once again, we can go to the lower end of the retail portfolio, which is strip malls. And we have 5.6 to 6.75 for the city's cap rates between the 20th and 80th percentile. And then for our outside sources, we have 6 to 7% for Colliers, 6 to 7% for CBRE, and 6.5 to 7.5% for Cushman and Wakefield. And I'll remind the panel that we have a 7.95% cap rate applied. And then from there on page 12, we have the municipal assessment at excerpts. And on page 13, we do have the subject property's income and expense mailer information. And if we look, we can see that the we do have fully owner occupied checked off under annual income received, so we have no income information. And nothing jumped out at me for the expenses to show anything unusual. And then on page 14, we do have the supermarket listed. They have the area there of 5,150 square feet. And they've checked off owner occupied in the subject property. And then on page 15 of the brief, originally we were we had class and liability checked off. So I had just included this, this table here showing our City of Winnipeg property class codes. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sharples, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few on the rent comparables on page 8.
Yep.
So I guess start with the first one, 530 St. Mary's. This was built in 2003, so you'd agree that this is significantly newer than the subject property?
What's our date again? Sorry, we go through so many files.
I believe it was 1939.
Yes, 1939. Yep, it's a newer. It would be considered newer from that perspective.
And so we would expect newer buildings to have higher rental rates. Is that true?
Typically they would go on the higher end.
Just the second one, 80 Sherbrooke. Again, quite a bit newer, and this has a significantly higher wall height. Is that something that's considered in determining the lease rate?
It might go into it, I guess. It could be one of the factors. I mean, these aren't modeled lease rates, mind you. These are market data lease rates. So
Okay. I should the your comparable lease that would be closest in size would be the bottom one at 957 Portage. You'd agree that this is an older lease?
yeah, it's a little older. It's 16 years, so it takes us over the reference period, but it is older.
Right. Those are my only questions. Do you have any, Carson?
Thank you.
I don't
Mr.
have any questions either.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Merritt, any questions?
Yes, I just have one, Mr. Pontanilla.
Yep.
This is located in the west end of the city. Your cap rate, does it reflect the location of the subject property in regards to if you've added anything out of, to increase the cap rate compared to what the city has, categorized the rates to be?
So if I'm understanding the question, I do believe that the cap rates, there is some influence that it would be with the market regions that they're found in. And so the cap rate that's applied, it's a modeled cap rate, and it would have sort of captured those parameters that you were speaking of in the cap rate.
Yeah, but I think you had stated that, the cap rate went to, I think, 7.25, maybe 7.5.
7.95% is the cap rate for this cycle.
Okay. I think that's all the questions that I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Colachuglio, any questions?
Just a couple, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Pontanilla, could I get you to look at the comparisons that you have? In
Yep.
those comparisons that you provided, first, are there any grocery stores included in that list?
There aren't. These are all mostly retail spaces. Grocery stores of that size that are net leases aren't typically common to find really reliable data. I didn't think it was.
Owner occupied?
It's owner occupied, correct? Yep, it shows it on its mailer there, and I didn't think it was appropriate to put actual grocery stores, which are completely different covenants, tenants, size, everything. So this would just be for C2 spaces. In
Fair.
theory, if the supermarket left, could another C2 space or, just another change of use, another space go in perhaps?
Yeah.
So I was mostly using it based on size and neighborhood, market region.
Appreciate that. Are any of the comparisons that you provided have on-site parking?
That's a good question, Mr. Colachuglio. I would have to bring up every single one, so it's I can't answer that question.
Just off the top of your head? No? Okay.
Like if you're referring to in Front Street parking, I can say Sherbrooke Street, there's parking there. I believe 530 St. Mary's Avenue has a parking lot as well. 1320 Portage Avenue, I'm sure that one has a parking lot as well. And I can tell you that 957 Portage Avenue does have spaces in the back to park as well, so there is parking included in them.
Yeah, this is, the subject has a very good-sized parking lot immediately adjacent to the building.
That's correct.
So that's particularly helpful for patrons to go into that building. That was the question I was looking for. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, Mr. Pontanilla, the comparables you use, are they also in the West Broadway region? as the
They're all
subject?
they're all within market region 5, yes. So they would be within the same overall market region.
And I note, and Mr. Kalashugi brought it up, that there's land to building ratio of
Yep.
2.15. So you don't know, and he asked you if any of the other spots would have as much area to building, and you don't
Uh,
know.
Well, typically, whenever we don't have any additional land value on the income stream. So if additional land value was allocated onto the income stream, I would have done a proper analysis to search land comparables and see. But because the parcel isn't divided into two, I'm treating it as one economic unit. So it was really irrelevant the size of the parking lot. It's there, but we don't have additional land value that's on top of it. It's still servicing the buildings. So there's nothing that jumps out at me that my comparables would be any less because they don't have the same size of parking lot. There's parking for all of them.
But what I'm referring to, I guess, is adjacent parking of the nature that this property has. Would that not influence the lease rates if you were not charging extra for the additional parking spots and this property is for lease? Would that be an enhancement to sign a lease for a larger amount?
I mean, those are market considerations that are taken for each individual owner, right? I don't really know. That's pure speculation on my end to speak to that.
Okay, I guess I don't want to do that. The model, though, doesn't go into that.
No, we have no additional land value. So as long as there's no additional land value, then we're working with what we got.
Okay. Okay, that's my questions. Thank you. Mr. Sharples, you can proceed with your evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll actually just jump ahead to page 6 of our submission. I'll give everyone a few minutes to get there. The first few pages was a lot of property description stuff, which I believe would be redundant to go over again. So on page 6, this is our requested assessment. So it has been assessed at $806,000. We're requesting that the board consider reducing this to $567,000. And this is based off a rental rate of $11.75 a square foot and a capitalization rate of 9.5%. Page 7, we just have the overhead maps. Page 8 is a few photos. And page 9 is where we look at the rental rate. So the assessed rental rate is $13.88 a square foot. We've looked at leasing of similar properties and determined that this should be closer to $11.75 a square foot. So we've identified 6 comparables here. The rental rate ranges from $10 to $13. That gets us to an average of $11.75. These properties are newer than the subject, and they are generally fairly close in terms of leasable area and wall height. Beginning on page 10, we have photos of these properties that we've used as comparables. So I know the topic of grocery stores for comparables came up in Roddy's portion here. We also don't have any grocery stores in our rental rate comparables. Our comparables have all been classified as retail store. And so that doesn't differentiate between grocery stores or just street front retail properties. And so the photos of the leasing comparables go through until page 12. And then on page 13, we've taken a look at the sales. So the assessment value is about $156 a square foot. We've identified 7 sales below. They transacted at rates ranging from about $63 a square foot on the low end up to $166 on the high end. Based on the average sale price here, we get $117 a square foot. So that's quite a bit lower than the assessment amount. And so based on that, this assessment value appears to be too high. And so our requested value of $567,000 on a per square foot basis is $110 a square foot. So we believe this aligns more closely with the sales. And again, these comparables are generally newer than the subject property, and so we would expect them to sell at a higher price. Page 14, we have photos of our comparables. So this first one, 929 to 935 Nairn. While not a grocery store, it does appear to be a convenience store. So fairly similar in that regard. That is the same as 117 Regent on page 15 at the bottom. And then on page 17, we've taken a look at the capitalization rate. So again, the assessed cap rate is 7.95%. We've done our best to do our own cap rate calculation based off of these sales. And so we've done that by using our requested rental rate of $11.75 a square foot. The challenge in doing these properties is we don't have the actual financial information. We don't have the rental rates of these comparable properties. So we have to do our best to estimate the NOI to the best of our abilities. And so to do that, we've used our requested rental rate, which we believe to be appropriate for this property type. And then we've used the vacancy rate, expense allowance, and operating costs as outlined in the City of Winnipeg guidelines for the valuation of income producing properties. And so in looking at all these, we calculate cap rates. They're kind of all over the place. I mean, from about 6.3% all the way up to 16.75%. But we do get an average of 9.95%. And so based on that, we are requesting a cap rate of 9.5%. So in conclusion, on page 18, we just have the valuation breakdown here. The left column is the assessed, the right column is our requested. So we are requesting that the rental rate be adjusted to $11.75 a square foot. This would reduce the potential income from about $71,500 down to about $60,500. And then with the 9.5% capitalization rate, we get to the requested assessment of $567,000. And again, that $567,000 does align with the sales we've identified on a per square foot basis. And beyond this conclusion page, we just have some supporting documentation, the notice of hearing, and the City of Winnipeg guidelines. And with that, we respectfully ask the board to consider reducing the rental rate, increasing the capitalization rate, and therefore adjusting the assessment value to $567,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Prendilla, any questions?
You're muted, Mr. Assessor.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. I do have some questions for the agent. Looking at his page 9 of 44, we can start there at the rental rate comparable information that he provided. And so I see here that we have 930 Nairn Avenue, 14,517 square feet. 1200 Portage, 12,899 square feet. And then 1421 Henderson Highway, 9,762 square feet. In your opinion, Grayson, would you consider these to be comparable properties to the subject, given their size discrepancies?
Yeah, I would say they're still comparable. I mean, maybe not as comparable to something that was closer in size, but I think it's still reasonably reasonably close. It's not like we've pulled comparables that are 50,000 square feet. So again, maybe less comparable than some of the others, but somewhat comparable nonetheless.
Okay, and for 930 Narren Avenue, do you have information on how that's being used?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. In the picture we have below, I did notice there's a Popeyes sign. I don't know if the Popeyes is next door. Oh, wholesale, it appears, yeah.
It's a wholesale? Okay. 1200 Portage Avenue, how is that subject being used? Or that comparable, I should say.
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, based on the photo, it does appear to be less comparable, but again, we've pulled leasing comparables of properties that have been classified as store.
That's classified as a store?
So I guess I'm not too sure. They've been pulled from assessor briefs and used as comparables.
Oh,
for
okay.
the
Our
property.
records indicate it's an office, but 123 Marion Street. Do you know what can you tell us about that one?
Just looking at the photo in our brief, it's not clear what this is being used for to me.
Okay. Are we sure about any of these comparables and how they're being used? Can we confirm that these are retail store spaces, or can we confirm that they're grocery stores? Is there anything that we know about these comparables besides just the numbers in front?
No, not exactly. Just that they have been used as comparables for store properties by the city of Winnipeg in previous years.
Okay, so let's move forward now to your sales information. So let's see here. We have 929 Snaren, we have 562 St. Mary's, Marion, Regent, Selkirk, Day, Keewatin. Are any of these close to the subject property on Broadway?
I'm not too sure. I'm less familiar with the area. Perhaps Carson, do you know?
Carson, are these close to the subject property?
Well, they might not be close or super close in terms of the physical location. They're all located in neighborhoods that have similar demographics, and would have similar rental rates. If you look at West Broadway and you think it's a kind of a lower income neighborhood, you look at Narren, that's again kind of a lower income neighborhood. You look at 1311 Day Street, again lower income. 26 Keewatin, again lower income. So while they might not be super close to the subject property, they all are existing in markets that are very similar to the West Broadway market.
All right. Okay, fair enough. And then let's see the sizes here. We can just move on from this one. I guess I'm not really sure if there's anything else to take a look at on the comparable sales there. And okay, now let's look over your cap rate information. So it appears to be that you are asking for a cap rate that's significantly higher. So we do have to go through this. 929, 935 Narren Avenue. We do have a sales price of $1,143,000 and did sell within the reference period. But I see that you are applying the $11.75 to then come up with the net operating income, which you then have your extracted cap rate. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then your $11.75, is there any indication that's put into it for the site-specific lease information? Is there any neighborhood information that goes into that? Any covenants, any tenancy details whatsoever for that $11.75?
No, there's not. So we don't have the financial information for these properties. So we have to do the best we can to estimate it.
Yep, I understand.
And so
But
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, I do understand that you guys have to work with what you have. But with that being said, you are asking for a request on a cap change. And when we look at the cap rate information, so we talked about Narren, how about 562 St. Mary's? We do have an area there of 3,344 square feet, a $275,000 sale. And then once again, we're applying $11.75. to come up with a net operating income, which then has a cap rate of 12.74%. Does the 12.74% seem appropriate for a subject property on St. Mary's?
No, it would probably be on the higher end. I acknowledge that, but
173 Marion Street is 173 Marion Street. We have a building area of 4,840 square feet, a sale for $303,000. We've also applied $11.75, which generates a cap rate of 16.74%. Is that an appropriate cap rate?
again, yeah, it might be on the higher end, but these are the comparables we identified, and those were the numbers that got spat out. So that's where we're coming from on these.
All right, so would you agree then if we look at 117 Regent Avenue West, we have the same parameters of $11.75 applied, which generates a net operating income of $52,388 for a cap rate of 11%. Again, would that be considered a little bit on the high end for a place on Regent?
Yeah, it could be.
So 413 Selkirk Avenue, a building of built in 1924, 4,204 square feet. We have a sale in 2021 for $650,000. You've applied $11.75 for a building on Selkirk. Do you think that's a fair rate for a building on Selkirk?
Again, I'm less familiar with the area, so I don't know if that would be appropriate for that street specifically. But again, without having the information for each of these properties, we just went with consistency and did the 11.75 across the board.
No, I understand, but I do have to go through your methodology on this. So you $11.75 across the board, it generates a net operating income of $44,048 with a cap rate of 6.78%, a 6% cap rate on Selkirk. Does that seem appropriate?
Potentially. I mean, yeah, it's tricky just because we would love to be able to adjust the different rental rates based on areas and all this kind of stuff. But we wouldn't have actual support for any of those rental rates.
Is there support for these?
There is in our rental rate comparables. So
the rental rate comparables that then derive an $11.75 rental rate, which is then applied to all of the sales, that would be considered comparable?
We believe the 11.75 to be an appropriate rental rate to be used for the subject property and comparable properties. We have identified these sales as comparables, and so that's why we've applied it across the board.
Okay, so just to be clear, that $11.75, that was derived from a market analysis, and then that same rental rate was then applied to every single sale to generate the cap rates that you're using. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then would you look at the cap rates that you've applied? You have cap rates that have in the range from 6.29% all the way up to 16.74%. Do you feel, in your opinion, that this would be the best data to use given the spread and the range of cap rates that you have there?
I'm going to interject, Mr. Pontinia. The 11.75, it's the average from looking at a number of different retail properties, all of which are leasing in markets that are similar to the subject property. And in your experience, I'm sure you're aware that when we're looking at capitalization rates, we always get quite a large spread. And these properties are in different locations, different parts of town. So of course we're going to have different capitalization rates. That's completely normal.
First, well, okay. So I'll address what you just said there. I don't see a big range of cap rates, so I'm not sure why you would have said that. And in terms of the cap rate information, it is relevant because you have a range there from 6.29% up to 16.74%, which you've then averaged and applied a cap rate. My question is that methodology appropriate to derive the cap rates which are then being applied and are then asked to be requested? That same cap rate of 9.5% being off the record for all of the cap rate information that we have in terms of their 20th and 80th percentiles. Is a 9.5% cap rate appropriate for that property? That's really what the question is.
We're not talking about that property. We're not asking for a 9.5% cap rate. This is just an example of one cap rate. We're not
on page 18,
9.5%.
you have 9.5% as a cap rate. I don't understand how you're not asking.
I misspoke, but we're not asking for a 16% cap rate.
You know, you're asking for a 9.5% cap rate, so I'm going through the information
No,
trying
I
to
think we got
understand.
your point. I think we got your point. I don't think you have to persist this questioning. I think we get it.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me see. What else do I have here? Yeah, you know what? It's just I have to point that. You know what? I'll have some time later to speak. Okay, so we went through the cap rate information. We've shown that these cap rates were derived from net operating incomes that are not site specific. We've derived that we have a long spread of cap rates there for a range, and we've understood how they've come to their cap rates that are
Is this
being
a
applied.
question, Mr. Padilla?
No, I'm just wrapping up my thoughts just to make sure that I have no other questions left, Mr. Chair. If you just give me one more second, I'm looking through the brief, and I believe that's all the information that I need to ask on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, may I say something?
Go ahead.
Would you please remind the assessor that he's supposed to be asking us questions, not just going through our brief and providing various anecdotes?
What?
No, you know, Mr. Padilla, I'll give you both an opportunity of giving a summation after we're finished. But okay, Mr. Merrick, do you have any questions?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Colagiulio. Any questions?
I do. It's to the calculation of your cap rates, gentlemen. I think that you've made a choice to calculate cap rates using a specific rent across the board. That just isn't proper valuation procedures. So I would suggest that you look at that part of what you do. So there's no logic behind that, and I'm afraid to tell you that. So thank you. Those are my comments.
Okay, so comment. You don't have any questions then, I'm assuming.
No, I don't have any questions. Just
And I don't either. Thank you very much. Any summation required by either of the parties?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'd like to provide summation.
Actually, go ahead.
So I just want to reiterate the subject property at hand is an independent owner-occupied grocery store in West Broadway, and the city's saying that the property is worth close to $1 million. Properties in West Broadway aren't selling for close to $1 million, and the assessor hasn't provided sufficient evidence to justify such a high assessment for a small independent business in a low-income part of town. And that's just what I want to summarize.
Yeah, but we're not dealing with business taxes. We're dealing right now with market value based on income approach.
Just in terms of the property and how it operates. That's just what I wanted to mention.
Mr. Padilla, any summation?
I would, yes. I would like to summate that my questioning was not to place the agents on any sort of a defensive position. It's merely to analyze the request that they have put forward, that they wanted a cap rate adjustment. And I was merely going through the methodology to show that I don't think that it's appropriate the way that they're deriving their cap rates. And for the sake of expediency for the other files, the questioning that I had for this particular file, I would ask the board to take into consideration going forward for the rest of the files that have cap rate request adjustments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Padilla. That'll be taken. Okay, thank you very much. We'll then now proceed with item number 3 on the agenda, which is the property at 1840 Arlington Street. And Mr. Padilla, when you're ready, you can proceed.
Okay, you just give me 1 second here. I just got to find my files. 1840 Arlington. Okay, I believe I'm ready. Okay, apologies about that. So up next we have file 24-884. The roll number is 1406-193-7100. The address is 1840 Arlington Street. The 2025 assessment has gone out at $667,000 with a reference date of April 1st, 2023. Once again, we're speaking of a commercial retail store. We have one building and one premise associated, an actual year built and effective year built of 1958, and a leasable area of 5,600 square feet. So on page 2, we can see the pad eye view image of the subject property. On page 3, we do have the overhead view, of the subject property. And on page 4, we do have a north-facing view and a west-facing view of the subject property. And then on page 5 and 6, we do have some images taken from the Google Street View image with a 2018 map overlay of the subject property. We have received requests for income and expense information for 2021 and 22, so we're okay there. We do have one sale on file from 2013 for $550,000. And we have no subject lease information. For rent comparables, I have included some rents that were within the market region, the same market region as the subject property. These are all retail comparables and they're all listed as C2, so they're standard commercial finishes. And so we do have a range there from 1,050 square feet at the lower end to 2,084 square feet at the higher end. And we do have rental rates ranging from $10.78 at the lower end to approximately $18 at the higher end. For the subject property, we do have 5,600 square feet on the income stream, and we have it at $11.23 per square foot. That does generate a potential rent of $62,888. We then have a modeled 5% vacancy, 3% expense, and $7 shortfall per square foot to bring us to a net operating income of $55,992. And then from there, we have a modeled cap rate of 8.4% to bring us to our value of $667,000. From there, we do have the summary of the income stream that we just spoke about. And then on page 11, we do have, once again, our cap rate information showing the 20th and 80th percentiles for all 4 different sources that we have there. And it shows that our subject is outside of the range of that. And then on page 12, we have Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. And then on page 13, and taking us to the end of our brief, we do have the subject's income and expense mailer for the 2022 reference year. And we can see that the first line under annual income received, we have owner occupied fully checked off. We have no income received as it's owner occupied, and then the expenses appeared reasonable. And I believe that's everything in my presentation. Oh, and then on page 15, we do have, once again, the property classifications for the original class and liability that had been checked off. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sharples, any questions?
I've got one. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just about the rental rate on page 9.
Yep.
Rental rate is $11.23. I'm wondering why, so that's about $2.50 a square foot lower than the property we were just talking about, 619 Broadway. They're very similar in size. And this one at Arlington is actually newer. So why is this rental rate lower than 619 Broadway?
Well, it's a different market region. So it's, there's going to be different characteristics being applied as to how the model generated the rental rates. If you look at the rental rates that I provided, those are all rental rates for within the market region. So the model would have taken those into consideration. And we have to consider the logic too, that this subject is actually in what would be considered the suburbs of Winnipeg. I know you're not from here, so you're not familiar with the neighborhoods, but that would be more into the north end, getting into the suburbs there. Whereas Broadway is downtown, so it's basically West Broadway. It's close to downtown. The density is different. So there are characteristical factors as to why the rental rates are generated the way they are.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, Mr. Pontonia, if you don't mind, I do have 1 or 2 questions. How does the Assessment and Taxation Department determine the locations of the different market regions?
I don't know, Carson. What are you asking me? I have not had an analysis of figuring out market regions. Really?
Well, we're talking about a property in the north end, and I'm looking at your properties, and they're mostly on McPhillips for your lease comparables on page 8. And I mean, I consider the north end to be quite a different market than what I consider out on McPhillips. So I think that's quite a fair question to say, you're saying this is the same market region. I think it's a fair question to ask what considerations are made and what makes a market region. Well,
I'm speaking to that would be speculation. I didn't show up at the department and create market regions, so this wasn't something that I did on my own. So I'm anything I say to it would be pure speculation at best.
Well, okay, I guess the question I want to ask is, did you consider any comparable rentals in the North End?
And what you got there is what you got from the market region, Carson.
So no, we didn't, in determining the rental rate, did we look at North End?
That is the
rental rate?
north end. That's within the market region.
Right, but they aren't actually all that close, considering,
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure where
Well,
the
let me
relevancy
interject.
of this is. Where I don't know where this is going with these
Excuse
questioning.
me. Excuse me, let me interject. I can say to you that this property is very, very close to McPhillips. Arlington and McPhillips run parallel to each other. And I know this property and where it is. It would probably take you about 5 minutes to walk from there if you're walking westerly to get to McPhillips.
okay, no further questions.
Okay. Mr. Barrett, do you have any questions?
I have none, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Kolochukwu, do you have any questions?
I was just wondering, were you unable to find comparisons that were a bit larger in space, like area-wise? I mean, the largest comparison you have is 2,084 square feet. Were you unable to find any larger ones in that market region?
Not within the market region, no. That's just what we had generated there is what we have. It looks like the majority of those spaces are probably owner occupied, so we're only using the lease information that we can verify.
Fair enough, thank you.
Mr. Pontanilla, I noticed that this property has a huge parking lot and the land area is 3.45. Any of your comparables, anything like that?
It's hard to say with some of these on McPhillips. They could have some fairly bigger parking lots on there. I don't have the information in front of me, but I don't have any pictures of those comparables to speak to. But I can say that we have once again, I looked at the income stream. I did notice the size of the building in relation to the parcel, but I immediately looked to see if we have any additional land value that's being valued, and we don't. So once again, it's being valued as one economic unit.
Yeah, no, I don't expect anything different. I mean, a grocery store needs parking if it's going to attract people to. None of your comparables are grocery stores.
Nope, that's correct.
And
Once again,
are these rates of grocery stores comparable to rates for other smaller retail outlets?
In my opinion, they would be. That's the reason why I was using commercial spaces, because if you look at we do have a lot of data in regards to grocery store lease information, but I just don't feel like they're the same. It's really comparing two completely different property types. I understand that this building is being used as a grocery store, but it's not really impossible to see it all of a sudden changing use into something different. It's not built like a C1 commercial retail warehouse. It's not a warehouse at all, so none of those sort of comparables would apply. So I was basically just working with any sort of commercial C2 spaces within the market region, just to give an idea of lease rates within that neighborhood.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Sharples, you can proceed with your evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So once again, just keep things moving along. I'll begin on page 6 of our submission. So before that, we got a lot on property description, current assessment. I don't think we need to go over that again. So for this property, we're not challenging the rental rate. We believe that rental rates for this property type should fall around that 1125 to 1175 range. So we're not requesting any adjustments to that rental rate. We are just requesting that the capitalization rate be increased to 9.5%. And from that, we arrive at our requested assessed value of $589,000. Page 7, we have our overhead map and the photos on page 8. And on page 9, we've taken a look at the sales. So just kind of making a note on the previous submission we had for Broadway. Looks like for this one, we did remove some of those outliers. So we have 4 sales here, ranging in value from $82 a square foot to $133 a square foot. This gets us to an average of about $110 a square foot, and the assessed value was 119 square foot. So we do believe that this property has been overassessed, and our requested value equates to $105 a square foot, which is a little more closely aligned with the sales. We do have photos of our comparables in here. So again, some of these are the same. The one on Nairn is a convenience store, so kind of similar. And on page 11, 117 Regent is also a convenience store. So again, we haven't included grocery stores. We've just looked at comparables that are retail store properties. So for this property, the assessed capitalization rate is 8.4%. This is actually a decrease from the previous assessment cycle. So previously this had been assessed with a cap rate of 8.95%. So that kind of caught our eye. Just based on the market right now, it doesn't really make sense to us that the cap rate would be decreasing year over year. And so we followed a similar methodology to calculating this capitalization rate. Again, we've removed some of those giant outliers, but following similar methodology, we've used the assessed rental rate of $11.23 a square foot. Understanding that this is slightly different from the previous disclosure we went over, but we can't justify just arbitrarily inputting rental rates and kind of estimating based on that. So we've just used the assessed rate and applied that to all the properties across the board. We do believe that these are comparable properties and would have similar rental rate. And so from this calculation, our cap rates range from 7.52% to 12.16%. This gives us an average of 9.51%. And so based on this, again, we've used vacancy expenses and op costs from the City of Winnipeg guidelines. And it is from this that we're requesting a cap rate of 9.5%. So again, to summarize on page 13, we have no issues with the assessed rental rate. We do believe that rental rates for this property type should fall within that range that has been assessed. We are requesting a change in the capitalization rate to 9.5%. And with that, we respectfully ask the board to consider reducing the assessment value to $589,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Parnell, any questions?
I do, yep. So let's look at his cap rate information again on page 12. I do see here that you have less information here than last time. So I guess from what you were saying, they're trying to get rid of the outliers. So that's good. But I do see here that we have 929, 935 Nairn. You've now applied the rental rates from the model of the subject property, and you've derived a cap rate of 7.85%. That same cap rate for 619 Broadway was 8.22%. So I just wanted to ask to confirm we have the same address in 2 briefs with 2 different cap rates, just to confirm the methodology. So for 1840 Arlington, you're now applying the modeled $11.23. That's correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then from there, that's how you're deriving your net operating income and then your cap rates for all 4 properties here.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, you know what, Mr. Chair, I believe based on all the questions that I had for 619 Broadway, I would like those to carry forward with the points that I had made previously regarding their methodology. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kolochuk, any questions?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think we've said enough already. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, any questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I don't have any questions either. Thank you. Okay, so we'll do item number 4, and maybe after that, since you're seated on the docket, We'll take a short break if that's okay
Sure.
with everybody.
Yep, that works.
Okay, so number 4 then is the property at 700 Berry Street.
Okay, just give me a second, Mr. Chair, to just open up the
Yeah.
file.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're ready to go now. Okay, so up next we have file 24-1010. The roll number is 0702-260-8500. The address is 700 Berry Street. The 2025 assessed value has gone out at $1,972,000 as of April 1st, 2023's reference date. Once again, this property is a commercial retail store. We have 2 buildings associated, 2 premises associated with the subject property, and it's a 1-story building. And we do have 2 actual years built and effective years built. For actual year built, we have 1969 and 2003. And then for effective year built, we have 1980 and 2003. So presumably maybe some permit work would have increased the effective age for that one building. And then we do have a leasable area of 15,582 square feet total. On page 2, if you look at my brief, I do have a pad eye view image of the subject property so we can see its orientation on Berry Street. And then on page 3, I do have a pictometry overhead view of the subject property. So you can see it's on the corner of Berry and Sargent Avenue. On page 4, we have a south-facing view and an east-facing view of the subject property. And then on page 5, we do have the Google Street View images of the subject property. We have received requests for income and expense information, so we're okay on that. And we actually do have some sales here for this subject property. And with the conversation of 333 Gary Street and the importance of sales prices, it is interesting that we do have a sale on this subject property. And the sale that we have is from March 13th, 2020 for $1,967,365. And so I would ask that any consideration for sales prices be considered for this file as well. And we do have another sale on January 12th, 2015 for $600,000 with a sworn value of $1.2 million. And then on November 4th, 2009, we have a sale for $1.5 million. For the comparable information, I have included some comparables with leases greater than 2018. These are all retail leases. They all have effective years ranging from, I believe it's 1974 and up. And then they're all within market region 6. And then we do see a area there ranging from 3,044 square feet at the lower end up to just north of 23,000 square feet at the higher end. And then we do have rents ranging from, looks to be $12.61 or $12 actually at the lower end, up to $21.25 at the higher end. So this subject property, we do have 2 premises listed. One of the premises we have is, the tenant class is a C1 retail warehouse for the current layout of the subject property. And that we have at a size of 12,612 square feet at $11.72 per square foot. And then we also have 2,970 square feet of what we have listed as C6 storage space. And we have that with a rate of $6.99. So that brings us to a total potential rent of $168,573. And then we have a total area of 15,582 square feet. And if we just do a quick calculation to get a blended rate, we do have a blended rate of $10.82 per square foot for the subject property. From there, we do have model parameters of a 5% vacancy, a 3% expense, and a $7 shortfall per square foot, which brings us to a net operating income of $149,886. And then from there, we have a modeled cap rate applied of 7.60%. which brings us to a value of $1,972,000 for the 2025 cycle. And then from there, we do have a summary of the income stream, which I just spoke about. And then on page 11, I do have my cap rate information that I've provided within the brief. And once again, we can look at those parameters that we're familiar with by this point for 20th and 80th percentiles. Following that, we have Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. And then from there, we have included the subject's income and expense information. And the 2022 mailer does list gross as income type. We do have a total rent received of $210,399.96. And then we do have insurance and management listed as their own lines of recovery. If we look at the mailer there. So it appears to be semi-gross. And then the expenses, nothing jumped out at me for the expenses of the subject property. And we do have it listed as 0% vacant with one tenant. And then if we look at the subject's tenant verification form, we do have Crevco Lifestyle listed as the tenant currently operating out of the space there. And we have a lease from 2020 to 25 for $17,533.33 per month. And we don't have an area, so it was a little difficult to calculate an area. They just gave us the monthly rates. So if we use our main floor area, I'm not really sure if they're including any extra storage in this lease or not because we don't have an area that's being given. So I had to do two quick calculations. If we use what we have on file for the main floor of 12,612 square feet, it gives a rental rate of $16.68. But again, that's semi-gross. And because on page 1, we have what appears to be, once I had spoken earlier that we have a property tax and we have a CAM recovery accounted for. So if we do a quick netting out of the one, actually, wait 1 second. Sorry, I spoke out of turn. We have an insurance recovery and a management fee that we have accounted for. So if we do a quick netting out of the CAM, this is just an estimate. We get approximately $14.18 net as the rental rate within their actuals. And if we use the total area that we have on file of 15,582 square feet, it gives a rental rate of $13.50 semi-gross. Once again, because we do have the management and the property tax recovered. And so if we net out the CAM recovery, then it gives us an approximate rate of $11.48 per square foot. And that information is based off their actuals provided. And once again, the modeled rate blended is $10.82 per square foot.
Thank you.
And I believe that takes me to the end of my presentation. The last page I have there is on the class and liability that's no longer under conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manila. Mr. Sharples, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First question, I guess you'd agree that this property is located in a predominantly industrial area.
I wouldn't necessarily agree to that, only because I do think that just off the top of my head, there are some commercial retail warehouses that are within the neighborhood. So I can't fully commit to saying it's an industrial area, but there is some industry that goes around there. I won't deny that for sure.
Okay. And this property has industrial zoning, correct? Yeah, page 1 of the brief, you'd agree that's M2 manufacturing.
Okay, yeah, M2 manufacturing, sure. Yep, that's what it looks like we have there.
Okay. Just a question on your leasing comparables on page 8.
Yep.
So would agree that majority of these properties are quite a bit newer than the subject. I see 2001, 2006, 2001, 99, 99, 2000.
What's the subject property's effective year again? 1969 and 2003 we have. So we have two, 1980 and 2003.
On the valuation breakdown we received, it was 1980.
If you look on my page 1, you can see 1980 and 2003. There's two buildings associated with the records. So we have one presumably older building, and then we have an addition that was built.
Okay.
That's all I got. You got anything?
Mr. Chair, if it's all right, I just have one question for the assessor.
Go ahead.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead, Mr. Brooksborough.
Thank you. Just pertaining to page 1 of the assessor's brief, Mr. Pontinia, I just wanted to ask what considerations are made in increasing the effective year built to 1980 from the actual year built of 1969.
So that would have been a qualitative decision that would have been made by one of my colleagues. Presumably that would have been tied to some permit work that was taking place. So if there was some high value permits that would have been allocated on to the building at some point, that would have then the decision would have been made to have increased the effective age from 1969 to 1980.
Okay, and I have a follow-up question. Where in your brief is that permit information that justifies the effective year built of 1980?
We don't have it in there.
No, okay, so nothing in your brief to justify the effective age of 1980?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, any questions?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Pontinia, did you investigate the sale that happened in March the 13th, 2020?
I did look into that sale, and what I can tell you is that we did receive some information that led us to verify that it was indeed an arm's length fee simple sale, and we had included it into our model for analysis. So that's about as far as I can tell you in regards to that sale.
Okay. MLS listing, do you know offhand?
I don't have it in front of me, sorry.
Okay. That's the only question I have. Thank you kindly. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Colatrubio, any questions?
No, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
And I don't have any questions either. Thank you, everybody. So, Mr. Sharp, would you proceed with your evidence now?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, we'll just jump to page 6. Don't need to repeat anything that's already been said on the details of the property. So again, the left column is the current assessment. The right is what we'll be requesting. So we are requesting a change to the rental rate down to $8 a square foot. We believe that's more appropriate rent for warehouses, and we'll get into that later on. But we're asking for a value of $1,439,000. Once again, page 7 and 8, we just have the overhead maps and photos. This goes through to page 9, actually. And then our evaluation begins on page 10. So we've taken a look at the rental rate here. This property is located in the St. James industrial area, and we believe it functions more as a warehouse. So we've taken a look at warehouse rents to use as comparables. And to kind of demonstrate, we've added some photos that the owner sent to us to kind of show that its use is more of a warehouse. So again, on page 12, as noted, the property's been assessed using a blended rental rate of $10.82 a square foot. So we've looked at leasing of other warehouse properties and determined that this rate should be closer to $8 a square foot. So we have the 6 leases below. They've all leased for rental rates ranging from about $7.16 to $8.50. From this, we get an average of $8 a square foot, and that's what our request is based on. These properties are very similar in size to the subject property and reasonably close in year built as well. We do have photos of some of these properties. The first one is on page 12 here, 1653 St. James. Following pages, we have 1521 Dublin, 1130 King Edward. Page 14, we have 1347 Border and 1500 Notre Dame. And finally, page 15 is 1725 St. James Street. So just looking at the photos of these comparables, and how they do compare to the subject property, they do appear to be fairly similar. On page 16, we've taken a look at the sales. So the assessment values for $126.57 a square foot, which appears to be overstated based on these comparables we've identified. So we've got 6 comparables here. They transacted at rates ranging from $60 a square foot up to $127 a square foot. So again, this is a fairly significant range, but we've taken a look at the average. Average and median are both around $97 a square foot, which is significantly lower than the current assessment. So our requested value equates to $92 a square foot, which aligns more closely with these sales. And our sales comparables are on the following pages. So to summarize, on page 21, we are requesting that the rental rate be adjusted to $8 a square foot. This is because the property is in an industrial area. It appears to function more as a warehouse, and based on our comparables, this rate of $8 a square foot seems reasonable. And we respectfully ask the board to consider a value of $1,439,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Pardinella, any questions? Pardinella, we can't hear you if you're talking.
You're muted.
Oh, apologies, guys. I had actually almost asked my entire question.
Okay.
I didn't realize I was muted there, and I'd almost finished actually asking the question, but we'll start over.
Okay. Go ahead.
We'll start over again. So on page 12 of I do have just 2 questions for Grayson. On page 12 of his brief, if we go to page 12 and we can look at his comparable lease information and how he based his reduction to $8 per square foot. So my question is are any of these comparables that you've provided, 1653 St. James, Dublin, etc., are any of these used in a retail manner, or are they all industrial buildings?
That is unclear to us. So we can only filter by warehouse. So that doesn't differentiate between retail or industrial warehouse.
Okay, so we don't know then if these are purely industrial buildings or not in their use.
No, we don't. I mean, just looking at some of the comparables, it does look like they could have retail portions, but no, it's unclear.
Okay. And then heading forward to page 16 of your brief, and where you talk about sales. So I'll let everyone get close to that still. So I see here that we have the same comparable sales. So 929 Nairn, 562 St. Mary's, 117 Regent. My question for you is for 333 Gary, the sales price was the relevant piece of information. Why is the sales price of 1,972 not important in this case, in this particular file?
So that was just outside of the valuation period. So that was in, sorry, when was that? I believe it was 2020 at some point.
2020. Yeah, that's within the reference period.
Was the reference period not, or the valuation period not?
April 1st, 2023 is the reference date.
And isn't it April 1st, 2021 to April 1st?
No. It's everything up to, including up to April 1st, 2023.
So that would include something from 2005.
Correct.
Okay, fair enough. We only looked at sales that occurred from April 1st, 2021 to April 1st, 2023.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Kolchuk, any questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at the pictures that you provided of the subject property, but it appears you've only provided the pictures for the service area of the property. How come you have not provided the pictures of the retail area, which makes up the lion's share of the space?
Those were the photos provided by the owner. He was
You
explaining
did
to us.
not go and attend and take pictures?
Pardon me?
You did not attend to take pictures?
I was not there. No, he sent them over email.
And are you aware that there's a mezzanine area in that building?
I mean, looking at the photos, it appeared that that could have been the case. We don't get on the information that's provided to us, which is shown on page 4. This is page 4 and 5 of our brief. We only have access to the total leasable area, so we don't know how that's broken down. We didn't know how many square feet of
Are
mezzanine
you not allowed to go see your properties, sir? I'm confused. Why wouldn't you go have a look? If you weren't certain.
We could. We're given the breakdown from the city, and it told us it was 15,582 square feet, and so that's what we used.
Those are my questions.
Thank you. And I'm looking at your sales, and I'm sorry, I'm looking at your properties you're using for comparable leasing. Are any of those single lease properties?
Off the top of my head, I'm not entirely sure.
Because I think that most of them are multiple tenants, if not all of them.
That could be the case, Mr. Chair. I'm not certain.
And I don't think any of them have a land to building area 4:1.
Again, I'm not sure. We haven't looked at the land area. Our listing database, we don't have access to the land area of each of these.
Okay. And in your comparable sales, I know we didn't use the property itself, which you indicated previously the best comparison is the subject, which we have in this case, but we're doing a valuation based on income anyway, so I won't belabor that. But why would you use 878 Ellis Avenue as a comparable?
So once again, so this property has been classified as a store property. So these comparable sales have also been classified as store.
Okay, because that happens to be a Caribbean restaurant.
Correct. Yeah, and some of these comparables have been in our other submissions as well.
Yeah.
We looked at the sales of similar store property to show that it's our position that the property assessment is too high. So we would say it's too high if it were a store property, and it should be considered as more of a warehouse.
Okay. Thank you. So that completes my questioning, and that completes this item. We are going to take a short break, but before taking it, I can indicate that I have a perceived conflict on the next 2 items on the agenda. And on that basis, I will not be hearing those. So Mr. Merritt will take over as chair of those 2. I will be put in the waiting room, and I'll wait to be admitted back into the hearing. And in the meantime, is a break until, how much time does it really need? About 10 minutes? Good?
Sure.
Mr. Chair, could I just add something as well?
Yes.
So I need to take off around 4 o'clock to go to the airport. So Carson will be taking over at that point. But if at some point I do disappear, that is why.
Okay, and that's fair. Thank you for letting us know.
Okay, thank you.
4 o'clock there is actually 5 o'clock here, so hopefully we'll be finished by then.
No, I'm in Winnipeg right now.
Oh, are you? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll break then until 3:20 and I can be put into the waiting room, I guess, and I'll wait till I'm called upon again after item number 6 on the agenda is heard.
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
In that regards, I'll turn off the AV and I'll put the applicants in the session waiting room as well.
All right, thank you. We'll call the hearing back to order. And the next property is number 5, which is 938 Sherbrooke Avenue. Mr. Padania, whenever you're ready, you can take us through that property.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, you mean Portage Avenue?
Portage Avenue, I'm sorry, what did I say?
Sherbrooke.
Yeah.
Okay, Portage Avenue. 938.
Okay, thank you. So if
Yep.
we're ready to go, up next we have file 24-940. The roll number is 1208-210-1000. The address is 938 Portage Avenue. The 2025 assessment has gone out at $1,751,000. We do have a commercial retail store as the property description. We have 1 building record and 5 premises associated. 1 story, and then we have an actual year built of 1933 and an effective year built of 1990. We do have 12,111 square feet on file as a total leasable area. And if we go to page 2 of my brief, you'll see the pad eye view image of the subject property. On page 3, we have the overhead view of the subject property. And then on page 4, we have the north-facing view and the east-facing view of the subject property. And then on page 5 and page 6, we do have some Google Street View images of the subject property. So I believe it's a wine shop there. And we do have some requests for information that was granted, so we have no problems there with any income and expense mailer requests. We have no subject sale history, and we have no property leases, as I believe it is owner occupied. So for rent comparables, I have chosen rent comparables that were listed as retail stores. These are from the Market Region 5, and they are C2, so comparable premises in terms of their use. And we do have an area ranging from 1,313 square feet at the lower end up to 8,416. Oh, my apologies, 1,076 square feet at the lower end up to 8,416 square feet at the higher end. And then we do have rental ranges ranging from $10.50 up to $24.62. For the income stream, we have 1 income stream on file that's under retail. And we do have 5 premises associated with the income stream. We have some premise variation in area from 960 square feet to 3,074 square feet. And then we have some rental rates ranging from $7.21 to $19.25 for the C2 spaces. As well, we have a basement premise that's associated on the income stream, 3,083 square feet at $4.30. And then we have a C6 storage space included at 3,074 square feet at $12.16 per square foot. So the total brings us to $156,600 for total potential rent. And if we do a calculation with the total leasable area, we do get a blended rate of $12.93 overall per square foot. From there, we do have a vacancy applied of 5%, an expense of 3%, and a $7 shortfall to bring us to a net operating income of $140,068. And then from there, we have a capitalized rate of 8% to bring us to our assessed value at $1,751,000. On page 10, I do have a summary of the information that I have provided. On page 11, I have my cap rate information provided for the cap rates that are being applied for the retail portfolio of properties. And then on page 12, I do have the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. And then on page 13 and 14, I do have the subject properties income and expense mailer. So it actually does show, apologies, I had mentioned earlier that it was fully owner occupied, but when you look at the mailer itself, it actually doesn't show fully owner occupied. That's not checked off. I must have confused that with another file we were speaking of. And then we do have gross listed as income type. So if you just give me 1 second here. So we have $99,282.52 being declared for total income received. However, it is gross. And then we do have expenses that appear to look reasonable. We have 0% space vacant and 2 tenants that are being listed. And then on page 14, we do have under the tenant verification section, we do have DeLuca's Fine Wines. And actually, I was correct in that in this page, they do check off owner occupied for their space there. So it's a little unclear what that $99,282 is referring to, as the tenant verification form shows that they did check off that it's owner occupied in the space there. And then on page 15, we do have the property classifications for the challenge to the class and liability at the time of the appeal. And I believe that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Questions of the assessor to Mr. Sharples?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one for me on page 13. You would agree that the reported NOI is quite a bit lower than what has been assessed?
Well, it's unclear what this is referring to, because if you look on the tenant verification form, it shows that they're actually owner occupied. So it's a little unclear what that $99,000 is referring to.
Okay, fair enough. You got anything?
If it's okay with Mr. Chair, I do have just 1 or 2 questions for the assessor. Mr. Pontanilla, on page 1, we have an actual year built of 1933, and we have an effective year built of 1990. Is that correct?
That's correct.
My second question here is, how does the effective age impact the city's valuation of the property?
So the effective age does have some relation to the rental rates that are being determined. So if the effective age is higher, then of course the rental rates might be a little higher to reflect that.
And now, where in your disclosure is the justification for the 57-year increase in the effective age?
Well, we don't have any permit information included.
No. So in the brief there, in the disclosure, there's no justification for the effective year built of 1990?
I mean, we have it on records here as to why it would have been done at some point, but it's not included in the brief, no.
So no evidence included for the justification of the 1990 effective age?
If that's the way you want to frame it.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Colatrello, any questions of the assessor?
No questions. Thank you.
And I have none either. So, gentlemen, we will deal with your presentation. Mr. Sharples.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, I'll just begin on page 6 of our brief. So we're requesting different rental rates for the different space type breakdowns. So we'll be requesting a main floor retail rental rate of $15.50 a square foot. We're requesting a substandard basement rental rate of $5 a square foot, and a storage mezzanine rental rate of $8 a square foot. So applying that to each space type, we've calculated a new value of $1,470,000. Once again, page 7 and 8 is just the overhead images and street view photos. And our valuation begins on page 9. So as mentioned by the assessor, the assessment uses a blended rental rate of $12.93 a square foot. Of the total square footage, 5,954 square feet is retail, 3,083 square feet is substandard basement, and 3,074 is storage and mezzanine space. And then it is our position that this blended rental rate should be $10.92 a square foot. And so how we've got to that is first we've taken a look at the main floor. So we've come up with the comparable leasing. These leases range from $10 a square foot up to about $20.50 a square foot for an average of $15.70 per square foot. At the bottom of the page here in this table, we have some spaces currently available for lease. And these listings range from $8 a square foot to $18 for an average of $14 per square foot and median of $15. So based on this, we think this should be about $15.70 per square foot. And so based on these listings and the current leasing, we're requesting $15.50 per square foot. For storage and mezzanine space, we've taken a look at some lease listings. So we couldn't find any actual lease transactions for storage space. But these 4 properties are being listed at rates ranging from $6 to $9 a square foot. And so, yeah, based on this, we're requesting the storage rental rate of $8 per square foot. And so for the substandard basement, given that we have this leasable basement space for approximately $8 a square foot, we believe that a reasonable rate to use for the substandard basement would be $5 per square foot. It should be noted that the actual assessed rate for this substandard basement space is actually $4.30. So our calculations actually use a higher rental rate for this substandard basement space. And at the bottom of page 10 here, we have a summary, kind of makes it easier to follow. This is kind of similar to what's on page 9 of the assessor's brief. We've used the $15.50 per square foot for the standard finished retail space, $5 a square foot for the basement space, and with $8 a square foot for the storage space. And so again, this gets us a blended rate using that 132,000 of PGI and the total area of just over 12,000. We're requesting a blended rental rate of $10.92 per square foot. On page 11, we've also identified some comparable sales. So the current assessment is at about $145 a square foot. We've identified the below sales. They transacted from about $93 up to about $141. This gets us an average of about $122 a square foot. And so based on this, we believe that the current assessment is too high. And our requested value equates to $121.45 per square foot, which is very closely aligned with the average sale price here. And we believe that to be a reasonable value. On pages 12 through 14, we just have photos of the sales comparables that we've used. And then I'll just jump ahead a few pages to 17. Beginning on page 17, we have photos of the leasing comparables that we've used. And then just returning to page 15 to summarize. So once again, we've looked at comparable leasing, lease listing reports, and from that we've determined the following rental rates. So for main floor retail, we're requesting this to be $15.50 a square foot, requesting $5 a square foot for the basement area, and $8 a square foot for the storage and mezzanine. And with that, we respectfully ask the board to consider reducing the assessment value to $1,470,000. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Pontanilla, questions of the applicant?
Yeah, just a couple questions. Heading back over to page 9 of your brief for the rental rate information that you provided. I'll let you guys have a second to get there.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, so for your addresses that you have in front of you, do you have an idea of what these addresses are being used at right now? Like the tenancy that's going on in these properties here?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. Again, these retail leasing comparables have been taken from previous years from the assessor briefs, and they have been used as comparables for this property type.
Okay. And then the size in particular, we have quite a range in sizing here. Is there any that you believe should be more comparable to the subject property? We do have a couple in the 12,000 range, and then we have them from the 1,000 and up.
Yeah, I suppose, I guess if we were just looking at the retail area, it's about 6,000 square feet. So I guess the ones on Sherbrooke and Portage, the second and third comparables are bigger, but at $10 and $13.50, and the next two are slightly smaller but closer, would be the Portage and Marion ones. So yeah, looking at that, I mean, we got $10 a square foot, $13 a square foot, $13.50, and $16.43. So we do believe that those closest comparables in terms of size would support our requested value.
Okay. And then getting to your storage information here on page 10 of your brief. Can you tell us these properties that you've included, are these freestanding restaurants or sorry, freestanding commercial buildings, or are they, what sort of buildings are we talking about here?
It doesn't appear that it is freestanding, but I'm not entirely certain.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's all my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank you. Mr. Colatriglio?
Are you aware of your comp on page 10? It says LL, and I assume that's lower level, 701 West Region Avenue, 11,500 square feet. Do you know what that actually is, gentlemen?
I do not off the top of my head.
If I were to suggest to you that that's a banquet hall, would that ring a bell for you?
Not to me, it could be. It's listed as lower level space.
And you're aware that that would be in a neighborhood strip mall?
I was not aware of what that is. I would say the subject property would be somewhat comparable to a neighborhood strip mall, though it does appear that it's a retail property with several units within it.
And further to those other comps that you've shown in basement there at 166 Meadowwood, would it be safe to say that's a strip mall?
It could
Very
be.
large strip mall?
It could be. Again, I mean, these are the only listings that we could find that would be comparable to basement storage space. So again, it is basement space. I'm not sure about the building on top of it.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So basically, the city's cap rate is at 8%, and you are also at 8% cap rate. The only difference is the rental rate for the subject property, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, the gross income would be the difference.
Okay. I thank you. Summation, either party?
I'm okay on summation. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, we have no need. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. We'll go to the next property then. Is 956 Portage Avenue. This is also the Lucas property. So Mr. Pontanilla, you're on the floor right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Either one work, by the way. Pontanilla. It's up to you. It's okay.
I have a
And
tough time.
And I see that Grayson is leaving now, so take care,
Okay.
Grayson.
Yep.
Have a
See
good one.
you.
Okay, so I will start now with the presentation of this file. So up next, we have file 24-941. The roll number is 1208-164-5500. The address is 956 Portage Avenue. Excuse me, the 2025 assessed value has gone out at $1,392,000 as of our reference period of April 1st, 2023. So this is another commercial retail store. We have 2 buildings associated with this record, 4 premises associated on file, and it's a 1-story building. We have an actual year built of 1956 and 1968 with an effective year in place of 1974. And we have a total leasable area on file of 9,446 square feet. So on page 2, you can see the pad eye view image of the subject property. It's actually right beside the property we spoke of earlier. On page 3, we do see the overhead view of the subject property. And then on page 4, we have a north-facing view and a west-facing view of the subject property. And then on page 5 and 6, we do have the Google Street View images from 2023 of the subject property. And then on page 7, we have received requests for income and expense information, so we're okay there. We do have one sale from 2004 for $307,500. And it looks to be 2 records of the same sale, one being at $1, so I'm not really sure what happened there. And we have no subject property lease information on file. And on page 8, I have included some rent comparable lease information. These comparables are all retail spaces. They're all within the market region 5 once again, and they're all labeled C2 for a designation. And so we do have the comparables ranging from 1,076 square feet to 8,416 square feet. And we do have a range in net rents from $10.50 at the lower end to $24.62 at the higher end. On page 9, we do have the subject property's income stream. So we do have one standard finish C2 on the top, 2,100 square feet at $16.35. We have a leasable basement space that goes into the basement at 4,397 square feet at $11.33. We have another main floor premise at 1,464 square feet at $16.93. And then we have a C6 storage premise on the stream at 1,485 square feet at $11.95 per square foot. That brings us to a total potential rent of $126,685. And if we divide that by the total area, we have a blended rate of $13.41 per square foot. And then from there, we do have model parameters of a 5% vacancy, a 3% expense, and a $7 shortfall per square foot to bring us to a net operating income of $113,434. And then we then have a modeled cap rate of 8.15% to bring us to a assessed value of $1,392,000. On page 10, we do have an income value summary of the information we just provided. On page 11 is a cap rate, is the same cap rate information that we put into our briefs. On page 12 is the Municipal Assessment Act excerpt. And then on page 13 and 14, we do have a mailer for the subject property. So if you just give me 1 second here, I can. So the 2022 mailer has been listed. It does list gross as income type. There's $33,360 that are being declared for rent received. We have no recoveries listed. None of the expenses jump out as being unreasonable. And then we have 2,200 square feet listed as the total. and one tenant listed. There's no capital costs. And then we do have one tenant listed on the file. So I believe what's happening is that DeLuca is, from looking at the mailer, that they're just declaring that the space that's being leased by another tenant. Because my understanding is they have some owner occupied space there as well. And the tenant there we have listed with a lease from 2020 to 23. And we have 2,200 square feet at $2,780 per month. And actually, when we look at the tenant verification, we see that net lease is checked off. It's a little hard to see there, but we can see that. And if we do the math on it, it does equal out to $33,360 for annual rental value, which is what they declare on page 1, $33,360. And then that equals $15.16 per square foot. But once again, there's a bit of a discrepancy between gross on page 1 and then net on page, gross on page 13 and net on page 14 of my brief. And then from there on page 15, I do have the property classifications for the class and liability challenge that has been withdrawn. And I believe that's my presentation. Thank you.
I thank you. Questions of the assessor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions for the assessor. Similar to the last questions I asked, on page 1 of the disclosure, we have actual year built, 1956 and 1968, and effective year built of 1974. Does the increase in effective age have any impact on the assessed value of the property?
As we've spoken about.
Yes, it does.
It does, as we've spoken about.
Thank you. And again, is there any evidence included in the brief in support of the higher effective age?
None related to the permit work, no.
Thank you. No further questions.
I thank you. Mr. Colatriglio?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
I have none either, so the floor is yours. You may present your evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to start by pointing out that I am a Winnipegger born and raised. I know that Mr. Sharple's land of origin was brought into question, but I'm a 5th or 6th generation Winnipegger, for the record. My great-great-grandfather moved to Winnipeg from Ontario in 1880. So deep roots in Winnipeg, proud Winnipegger.
All right.
Not necessarily relevant to the market value, but I thought I would just put that out there.
Very nice.
All right, so file number 24-941, address 956 Portage, assessed value of $1,392,000. Moving to page 3 of the disclosure, subject property, 9,446 square foot retail store with an assessed year built of 1974. Requested assessed value of $1,116,000. We'll move on to page 6 of the disclosure, where we are requesting a main floor retail rental rate of $15.50 per square foot and a requested basement storage rate of $8 per square foot. We're not disputing the expense allowance, vacancy allowance, or capitalization rate. Page 7 has the overview of the assessment map and an aerial photograph. Moving on to page 9, we have some comparable leases on Portage Avenue, Sherbrooke Avenue. Square footages range from just over 1,000 square feet to 12,000 square feet. If we take an average, we get an average rental rate of $15.70, median rental rate of $15.75. And that again is for the retail portion of the building. We also have our lease listings here between $8 and $15. And we're looking at retail properties on Main Street, Wall Street, Portage Avenue, and Regent Avenue West. So when we look at comparable leases similar to the subject property, I don't think it's much of a stretch to say reasonable rental rate for the property reflecting market rents, $15.50 per square foot. Moving on to page 10, we do have some basement storage rental rates. These were discussed previously as we were discussing the property next door. So I won't dwell on it too much. We've already looked at these. Mr. Colatruggo did mention that the Regent Avenue West property is a banquet hall. However, it is still a basement space. So I think it is still relevant and can still be considered. And then if we summarize, again, just looking for a rental rate of $15.50 for the main floor retail and $8 a square foot for the storage space. The blended rental rate is therefore $10.83 per square foot, which we feel is reasonable. Moving on to page 11, we have some comparable sales. Looks like 3 of them are on Portage, similar square footage. We look at those Portage properties, 93 a square foot, as high as 138, 98 a square foot. Those comparables are fairly representative of the property, very similar properties. So our requested assessment comes in at a rate of $118.15 square feet, which is in line with these sales, especially the lower two here, 2653 and 1375 Portage, as well as a similar year build for the properties as well. On the subsequent pages 12, 13, and 14, we do have photos of the comparable properties. And then on page 15, we just have our income valuation summary again. We do feel that the property's been overassessed, and we have provided strong evidence in support of a lower rental rate. And that will conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.
I thank you, sir. Mr. Pontania.
I think I looked at page 9 of the brief. I was going to beleaguer the rental rate questions that I had earlier, but I see that the list that's being used for this subject is the same as the previous brief, which makes sense. I mean, the appeals are side by side, so I think I made my point on the previous file on these on this information. Thank you.
I thank you. Mr. Colatruggo, any questions of the applicant?
Just one. Is the applicant aware that there's a cooking school in the basement of this property?
Sorry, Mr. Colatruggo, could you repeat that?
I was going to say, are you aware that there's a DeLuca cooking school in the basement of this property? The tenant upstairs is the Closet Chicks, but if you go downstairs, there's a fully operational kitchen and restaurant kind of a thing that goes on there. Are you aware of that, sir?
No, sir, I was not. But now that I am aware of that, we ought to be pursuing an exemption for if it's an educational space.
Well, that'd be novel to go down that road. But I'm going to suggest to you that the space has been renovated to a certain degree, I would assume. I'm not sure that you're looking at comparable spaces. That's my problem here.
Yeah, that's a fair point to make. Just looking at market rents for basement spaces, certainly some basement spaces are going to be more renovated than others. All basement spaces are somewhat limited in terms of their market value, given the fact that limited natural light and that they're in basements.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to look at a few things, I see that the city's at 8.15, and the applicant is also at the same rate as in the previous case at 938 Portage Avenue. So it's basically coming down to rents achievable. Either party wants summation?
No summation on my part. Thank you.
No summation for me either, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Mahone, I think we can let Mr. Diamond back in, and he will be chairing the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Sounds good. Present.
Well, silent. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, Mr. Chair, you can hear and see us, you're on mute at the moment.
I'm sorry?
Oh, just start speaking to Mr. Diamond. I have him back in, but he's just on mute at the current second.
You're on mute, Harvey.
Okay.
You go. Okay, you hear
There
me
we
now?
go.
All right.
It's really good.
Mr. Diamond, the floor is turned back to you, sir. You're chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Merritt, for looking after things in my absence.
You're welcome.
Okay, so the next matter on the agenda is item number 7, which is the property at 1848 Portage Avenue. And Mr. Patinello, when you're ready, you can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Diamond. I would like to just clarify it's 1838 Portage Avenue. I
And
believe
you're right, I put my glasses on.
you might have said 48, yeah, but that's okay. I just wanted to
Yeah.
clarify that.
It is 1838. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay, no problem. So up next we have file 24-704. The roll number is 0702-003-1000. The address is 1838 Portage Avenue. The 2025 assessment has gone out at $800,000. This property is a commercial retail store. We do have one building record associated, 2 premises on file, and it's a 2-story building. The actual year built is 1955 with the effective year built of 1970. And then we do have a leasable area of 5,033 square feet. So on page 2, we do have a pad eye view image of the subject property. On page 3, we do have an overhead view of the subject property. On page 4, we do have a north-facing view and a west-facing view of the subject property. And then on page 5 and page 6, we do have some Google Street View images of the subject property. And we can see that this was taken in 2022, and it does show the renovations that have been done to the subject property itself. We have received requests for income and expense information, so we're okay there. And we do have some sales information. It looks like the first sale was for $310,000 back in 2010. And then we do have a dollar sale in 2007. On July 30th, we have 2 sales, but one of them showing $1. So, and then we have no subject property leases associated with the file. For rent comparables, I do have rent comparables that fall under retail spaces. They are all more recent leases from 2015 and up. As well, they are all C2 premises, and they are all from the market region 6. And then we can see a spread of area, a range from 346 square feet at the lower end, up to 5,550 square feet at the higher end. And then we do have some rents ranging from $13 at the, $12.61 at the lower end, up to $21.25 at the higher end. On page 9, we do have the income stream for the subject property. So we do have 2 premises associated with the income stream. And we do have them at $14.91 on the first premise, and then $9.53 on the second premise. And that brings us to a total potential rent of $62,688. And if we do the math on that, we can calculate the blended rate of $12.45 is the blended rate for the subject property. And then from there, we do have a vacancy of 5% applied, a expense ratio of 3% applied, and a shortfall of $7 per square foot. So that brings us to the net operating income of $55,987. And we then have a 7% cap rate applied for a assessed value of $800,000 rounded. And then on page 10, we do have a summary of the income stream that we just spoke about. On page 11, we do have our cap rate information that we have spoken earlier about. On page 12, we do have the pertinent Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. And then on page 13, and taking us to the end of our presentation, we do have the subject's income and expense mailer information. And we do have it listed as being partially owner occupied. And then they have also checked off net as income type. And then we do have $30,000 listed as total rent received. None of the expenses jump out as being anything unreasonable. There's quite a lot of expenses there, but they don't really jump out as anything being unreasonable. We have a small capital cost incurred, but we don't have an age on it, so we're not sure if it's within the reference period. And then we do have a tenant listed. We have no area for them, but we do have a tenant listed at $2,500 a month. Which brings us to the $30,000 of annual rental value that's being declared on page 1 of the income and expense mailer. And we have no other further information on whether that is gross or it's net. So it's a little unclear on the information that's presented in the income and expense mailer, but nevertheless, we do have some information there. And I believe that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Horsberg, any questions?
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any questions for the assessor.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Mr. Mayor, do you have any questions?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Colachuglio, do you have any questions?
I have no questions, Mr. Chairman, at this time. Thank you.
And I don't either, so thank you very much. So, Mr. Horsborough, you can go on with your evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While you were recused from the previous presentation, I made a point of making the board aware that while Mr. Sharples was questioned for his land of origin being out west, I did point out to the board that I am born and raised in Winnipeg, and my family's been residing in Winnipeg since the 1880s. And while it's not particularly relevant to the market value, I just wanted to point that out, that I am a Winnipegger, a proud Winnipegger at that.
Okay, that's very nice to know, and please proceed with your evidence.
Thank you. So starting on the first page, again, we're discussing file number 24-704, 1838 Portage Avenue, with an assessed value of $800,000. Moving on to page 3, we are requesting an assessed value of $622,000. Moving on to page 6, we aren't disputing the potential income. We are not disputing the expense allowance. We are, however, disputing the capitalization rate. And so when we take the assessed net income and divide it by the capitalization rate of 9%, we do arrive at the assessed value of $622,000. Moving on to page 7, we have the assessment map and the aerial photographs of the property. On page 8, we have additional photographs of the property. And on page 9, we do have some sales of similar properties ranging between just shy of 4,000 square feet to just about 5,500 square feet. We can see from the comparable sales that most of these properties have sold for approximately $120 per square foot, whereas the subject property has been assessed at close to $160 per square foot. Our requested value equates to 123.60 square feet, which is well supported by the sales, whereas the assessed value is not supported by the sales. Sorry, I'm just gonna have a sip of coffee here. Moving on further, we just have photos of the comparable properties. And then on page 13, we have our capitalization rate study. So we have again applied the average rental rate for retail properties such as the subject. And that's how we've determined our net operating income, and then the calculated cap rates as well, which range from 7.86% to about 13.5%, with an average of 9.7% and a median capitalization rate of 8.5%. So considering the range and the average capitalization rate for comparable properties, we feel that capitalization rate of 9% is well supported. So again, just to reiterate, we aren't disputing the potential income, vacancy allowance, or expense allowance. We feel that a 9% capitalization rate is a better reflection of the market, and that's how we've determined the requested assessment of $622,000. And we would respectfully request the board to revise the assessment to $622,000. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hertzberg. Mr. Patinella, do you have any questions?
Just one question, but I would like it just to be carried forward for all the files. I just want to point out, heading back again, using 619 Broadway as a baseline. For 929 Nairn, we have a cap rate of 8.22%. Jumping forward to the current subject property under review, the same sale on 929 Nairn, we have 8.73%, so a discrepancy in cap. So just to confirm again, Carson, you're using our rates, our subject properties modeled rental rates, and then applying it to all of the sales that you have in this table, correct?
Sorry, could you phrase that as a question?
Are you using our modeled rental rate for the subject property and then applying it blanket to all of your sales information that you have under your cap rate table? Is that the methodology in place again?
Give me a moment here. I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Are you using our modeled rental rate in your cap rate study of $12.45 and then applying it blankets to all of your sales data relevant points that you have in your table?
I understand the question. We're using that as an average rental rate. And
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, no further questions, Mr. Chair. I would like just all that commentary to be carried forward with my previous questions on their cap rate methodology. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Golochukwu, you have any questions?
The answer just asked the question and I received the answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barrett, any questions?
I have none, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't have any either, so that can take us then to the last item on the agenda today. Agenda item number 8, which is the property at 1851 Portage Avenue. And Mr. Patinella, when you're ready, you can proceed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just opening up my files here. Just about ready. Okay, so the last file we have on the docket is file number 24-729. The roll number is 0702-032-2000. The address is 1851 Portage Avenue. The 2025 assessment has gone out at $1,492,000. This property is listed as a commercial retail store. We have both an actual year built and effective year built of 2011. And we do have a total leasable area associated with this subject of 11,766 square feet. On page 2, we do have a pad eye view image of the subject property. On page 3, we do have the pictometry overhead view of the subject property. And then on page 4, we do have a north-facing view and a west-facing view of the subject property. On page 5, we do have the Google Street View images from the 2023 map overlay. We have received requests for income and expense information, so we're okay on that part. We do have some sales associated with the subject property. The most recent sale we have is from January 21st, 2015. And we do have a consideration and a sworn value and a sales price, all of $1,280,000. On August 3rd, 2012, we do have a sale as well for $320,000. That's both sale and sworn. And then on August 6, 2010, we do have a sale and sworn value of $209,000 as well. We have no lease information on file for the subject property. On page 7, I have included some rent comparables. Once again, these comparables are all retail in nature. They all have effective leasable dates ranging from 2015 and up. They are all designated as C2 spaces, and they are all from the market region 6. And then we do have a range of area from 1,346 square feet up to 5,550 square feet. As well, we do have a rental range from $12.61 at the lower end up to $21.25 at the higher end. On page 8, we do have the income stream for the subject property under review. So we do have three premises associated with the stream, 2 C2s and 1 08 premise. Our first C2 premise is 5,196 square feet at $15.01 per square foot. And then we have an 08 substandard basement at 5,310 square feet at $2.81 per square foot. And then we have another C2 premise at 1,260 square feet at $17.20. And so when we put that through the stream, we have a total potential rent of $114,585. And if we do the math, we get a blended rate of $9.74 per square foot. We do have the model parameters of 5% vacancy, a 3% expense, and a $7 shortfall to bring us to a net operating income of $101,472. And then we do have a cap rate of 6.80% applied to give us our our assessed value of $1,492,000. On page 9, we have included the income value summary for the information I have just provided. On page 10, we do have our cap rate information that's provided there. On page 11, we have our Municipal Assessment Act excerpts provided. And then on page 12, and taking us to the end of the brief, is the subject's income and expense mailer information. And so if we take a look at the mailer, we do have gross listed as the income type. We do have $127,273 of rent received. I'm not sure why there's 100 beside percentage rents, if they mean it's fully 100% rent or they have $100 in percentage. It's a little unclear. But that brings us to a total income of $127,373. We have nothing that in the expenses that would seem unreasonable. we have 6,456 square feet that was declared. And then if we look onto the tenant verification form, we have 2 leases that are being declared. Both of them are gross leases. And we do have a lease at 5,196 square feet at $9,428.37 per month. And if you guys want me to do the math on that, and 37 cents, it gives us an annual rental value of $113,140 for the wealth planning group. And if we divide that by the area, 5,196, it gives us a blended, or it gives us a rate of $21.77, but it looks like it's a gross lease. So a quick calculation of that gives us a revised rate of $14.15 for that lease. And then if we look at the other lease that's being declared, we have 1,260 square feet at $2,700 a month. And that brings us an annual rental value of $32,400. And then if we take 32,400 and we divide that by the total leasable area, we have a rate of $25.71, which again appears to be a gross rate. So to quickly net out to get an approximation, we have approximately $16.71 for a approximate net rate on both of those. And if you guys want, I could take the time to add up both of those annual rental values in both areas to give you an idea of a blended rate on the property. Did you guys want me to do that?
Not necessarily, I don't think.
Do you need that information, or are you okay with what you have?
You know, it's your case. You can put forward the evidence you wish to put forward.
Okay, so if we did the 5,094, where are we here? 94 times 12, so 113, 140. And if we add the...
I'm sorry, I have to object. He's introducing new evidence.
It's not new evidence.
It's not new evidence. It's on the mailer.
So he's just being arithmetic on what's already there.
It feels like
We
it's
can
new
do that.
evidence. If it's not written down on the disclosure.
It's math, Carson. You have to do math in this job.
Where's the math we have to do, Mr.
The math is coming from the disclosure statement. I mean, we could do it, and I don't think it's really necessary anyway. I'm just allowing Mr. Bundell to put forward whatever evidence he feels is necessary, and that's up to him. But it's already in the record. He's just doing mathematics.
Yeah, I'm just doing the math on it. So basically, if you add up both annual rental values from both of the lease information there, and then if you divide that by the total lease information we have there, we get a blended rate of $22.54. But because that's a gross rate, a quick netting out of that gives us a blended rate of $14.65.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Bundell?
No, that's all my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horsberg. Any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Contriglio?
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merrick, any questions?
None, thank you, Mr. Diamond.
And I don't have any either. So thank you very much, for that. And Mr. Horsborough, your evidence, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So starting on page 1 of my disclosure, again, we just have file number 24-729. Subject property 1851. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. See, this is what happens when you end up covering for someone. Sorry, I'm going to have to ask for 1 minute here.
Take the time, as much time as you need, Mr. Horsborough.
Thank you. Okay, I apologize for that. I have the correct disclosure open now.
Okay, go forward, please.
So we've already discussed the property, so I'm going to move ahead to page 6 of the disclosure. So we're not disputing potential income. We're not disputing the vacancy allowance. We're not disputing the expense allowance. We are, however, disputing the capitalization rate. It is M&P's position that a capitalization rate of 8% is a better reflection of market value. When we divide the assessed net income by the capitalization rate, we arrive at an estimate of market value amounting to $1,268,000. Moving on through page 7 and 8, we have on page 7 the assessment map, and below that an aerial photograph, as well as exterior photographs on page 8. And moving forward to page 9, we have some comparable sales. We can see that the property has been assessed at a rate of $126.81 per square foot. The comparable sales we're looking at range from $62 a square foot to $141 a square foot. We feel that looking at the average of 107 a square foot and the median of 111 per square foot, that the requested rate of 108 falls in line with these sales. On the subsequent pages, page 10, 11, and 12, we have photographs of the comparable properties. And on page 13, we have our cap rate study. We can see that capitalization rates for comparable properties range from 6% to 13.78%, average capitalization rate of 8.78%, and a median rate of 7.92%. Considering these cap rates, the requested capitalization rate of 8% is in line with comparable sales. In summary, again, we are not disputing potential income, expense allowance, vacancy. We're in agreement with the net income. However, we feel that the capitalization rate of 8% better reflects the property, and that's how we've arrived at the requested value of $1,268,000. And we would respectfully ask that the board revise the assessed value to $1,268,000. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hirschberg. Mr. Patanella, any questions?
Just one question, similar to 1838 Portage Avenue. If you'll allow me to just frame it in this manner, once again, using 619 Broadway, their own brief as a control. We have 929, 935 there and there, a cap rate of 8.22%. And then in the brief that we just spoke about, 929 there, and the same sale, the same address, and a cap rate of 6.77%. So just to confirm again with Mr. Horsberg, the methodology that they're using in place is taking the modeled, here, let me frame this as a question. Are you taking the modeled rental rate that we have and applying it to all of the sales that you have in your cap rate study?
It appears that way.
Okay, no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Contichulio, do you have any questions?
No questions at this point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Merritt, do you have any questions?
Yes, just a couple. The property, you obviously have talked to the client, but the client probably bought this building back in 15, and he paid 1.2 or $1,280,000. Did he enlighten you in regards to what he bought, or what if he bought the business or the building and the land?
I'm not able to. I'm not aware if there was a going concern with the purchase. I I can't confirm whether or not there was a going concern with it as well, or if it was just the land and the building.
Just offhand, do you discuss your evaluation with the client, your clients?
It depends on the client. Some clients want to be more involved in the process than others. For this client, it was Mr. Sharples who had prepared the disclosure. So I'm not aware if he had any discussion with the client. So I'm afraid I'm not able to answer that.
Okay, I thank you. That's all the questions I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hirschberg, I don't really want to debate you on this because it's not your work. I know you're in here for Mr. Sharples, who did the present preparation. But I'm looking at your table and you show for using your methodology for 459 Notre Dame, which is, thank you for giving us pictures of your property. So that's very helpful. And I wish all parties did that. But anyway, it would show a cap rate of 6.09. Does that sound reasonable for that property? You know, Winnipeg, you can see a picture of the property. Do you think that's a reasonable cap rate to derive from the methodology you used?
Personally, I would expect properties in that neighborhood to have higher capitalization rates, given the neighborhood. When we look at capitalization rates throughout Winnipeg, certainly in lower income neighborhoods, there's a lot more risk with investing in real estate. So thinking back to the reference date of April 1st, 2023, if you were to plunk $1 million down into a GIC, you could get a guaranteed rate of return of 5%. So anyone wanting to invest in a higher risk asset would expect a rate of return that's going to be higher than a guaranteed rate of return that you could get through, the Bank of Montreal with a GIC.
Of course.
So I would expect the capitalization rate to be significantly higher in order to justify taking on that kind of a risk.
And the rate that the model used for this particular property that we're dealing with is 6.8%, which is 70 basis points higher. So does that make it not, if 459 Notre Dame Avenue is a reasonable cap rate, would that not certainly justify the cap rate for the model as chosen for this property?
Yeah, my thinking, and in discussions with all of the real estate developers that I work with, anyone who's looking to invest in real estate is going to want a rate of return that's significantly higher than what a guaranteed rate of return would have been on April 1st, 2023. So 1.8% higher than what a guaranteed return of 5%, I would expect that they would want at least 3% higher than that, the GIC rate of 5%. So looking at the 8% cap rate, I feel like that is a little bit more reasonable. If someone could offer me 3% more than what was guaranteed, I would be a little bit more comfortable with the risk you're taking on. 1.8% higher than a guaranteed rate of return wouldn't really be quite enough to justify the risk you're taking on. So looking at the 8%, framing it that way as well, I think that's reasonable.
Okay, because it'd be reasonable too. The property sold in 2015 for $1,280,000, and it's now assessed at $1,492,000, which shows that there's also a capital gain that can be achieved over and above the rental income. And wouldn't that be something that a potential purchaser might look at, realizing capital gains in the future?
It's possible. I can't speculate too much. Certainly the market was different in 2015. I feel that the 8% cap rate is reasonable and justifiable.
Okay. Thank you for answering my questions. So we've now dealt with every item on the agenda today. We will make our decisions and they'll be up very soon. And thank you for your attendance. And thank you, Mr. Panula, for your attendance. And also please pass on my thanks to Mr. Sharples, who I know had to leave early.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Diamond. Thank you, Mr. Merritt. Thank you, Mr. Culture-Gleo.
I'll go turn off the AV.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rody.
Thanks, Mike.
Mr. Chairman, can we have